throughout the nation, but throughout the country. We have a pretty impressive millennial here with Cahoots, and that announcement will be made in the next couple of days. So really excited about that. I see Hank Marshall in the audience, and you know that we're closer to the beginning than the end. But you know, Hank, can't thank you enough, and the entire CED team. The city of Phoenix is really doing its part in becoming the place for entrepreneurs in the country, and of course, you know, supporting our co-working spaces, incubators, accelerators. It's a great place for the city of Phoenix to be a great space. Let me see. I have a couple of other things here. The DACA Forum. We're having a DACA Forum this Thursday. We are just one of several offices that are hosting it. I know it's the District 5 team, along with Districts 4, 7, and 8. October 23rd, the council districts, along with the Arizona Community Foundation, is spearheading an effort to have a conversation with stakeholders, nonprofit organizations, and of course, city staff about our youth who qualify for the federal program known as DACA. This is a briefing and information session, and will lead into breakout groups, and you know, the more information, the better. So this is city staff, elected officials, of course, other stakeholders coming together to work with our youth. If you like more information, you can always call several of the council offices, but certainly the District 5 team as well at 602-262-7446. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilman Valenzuela. Councilman Gallego, did you have any council information and follow-up requests? Yes, those are here, though. Councilwoman Williams is on the phone, so I'm going to go to her next. All right, we'll come back to Councilman. Councilman Williams, did you have any council follow-up information or requests?
Yeah, I would like to thank all of the Blockwatch groups that participated in all the GAIN activities last weekend. They did a great job, great celebration, and I just wanted to let them know how much it's appreciated and how much we appreciate all the work that they do. And then secondly, I want to remind everyone this Saturday, this weekend, is the Pioneer event at Turf Paradise. So I'm hoping that everyone will come and we'll have a great time, great party, raise some money for Pioneer Museum. That's it.
Thank you very much, Councilman. Thank you for your leadership on Pioneer Museum, a very important asset to our city. And I know it's a personal passion of yours. Councilman Pastor, did you have any council information or follow-up requests today?
Sure. We're going through all our council stuff, right?
Now's the time. If you have any, yep.
All right. I just want to get cleared.
No problem.
Okay. I just wanted to thank those that participated in the GAIN events and everything that happened this weekend. And I really like to thank our Blockwatch community and our neighborhoods, and also our police officers and other departments within the city. Also would like to thank all those community members that participated in the FAA discussion. We are hoping that changes will happen, and special thanks to Chad from the Aviation Department for facilitating the meeting and making sure everyone had an opportunity to speak. Also, the Athena Luncheon will be honoring outstanding women, and so I want to congratulate those women and those nominees that are participating. And finally, Valley Metro will be doing a tribute to Congressman Ed Pastor at the Sandra Day O'Connor, and those, please attend. It's a tribute on his lifetime of work with the transportation industry. I also want to let you know to save the date. On Saturday, November 1st, Midtown Museum District's Urban Living Tour. So please come join us and enjoy all the urban living tour within our core, so that you may possibly want to purchase a home or an apartment within that area. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman Pastor. Councilwoman Gallego, are you ready?
I am. I was waiting because one of the first things I wanted to mention was just to further congratulate
Wait, can I ask
Councilman
you a question?
Nowakowski. What?
Did you have a happy birthday?
I had a wonderful birthday.
One day belated birthday. I want to ask how old you are, but congratulations, and I'm glad you had a great birthday. When we're all, should we sing? No, we're not going to sing. No, Councilman Gallego, it's your show.
Yes, Monday was my birthday, yes. The big 3-3, I think it's been in the newspaper, so I can.
Did you hear that, Councilwoman Williams?
I heard that. Baby.
So still the youngest, but maybe I'm catching up a little bit. And we celebrated at Mother Brunch Brewery, a new District 8 business, so that was exciting to be able to welcome them to the community. We've had a lot of good welcome moments lately, including having the mayor join us to open up, do the groundbreaking of a new biosciences building. So biosciences jobs also.
Happy birthday. That's good.
But the one thing I was waiting for was to congratulate Councilman Nowakowski on his Oatley Award, the top award from the country of Mexico for people living in the United American citizens, and very prestigious. So many of us were able to celebrate that with you, but it would nice to recognize you at a council meeting.
Thank you, ma'am.
I wanted to thank Mayor Stanton, Councilman Gates and Waring, and representatives from McCain, Flake, and Pastor offices for visiting with our flood victims. It was great to have you out, and they really did appreciate that. And as we continue the momentum towards recovering, I was hoping we could get an update from staff on the volunteer resources available and nonprofit resources available to help people with rebuilding, as well as any city resources, because people are still very much not in their homes yet, and it'd be great to make sure we have all the information in one place for them so that we can continue that forward momentum. And I would love to get the update on whether there are any possible public-private partnerships that we might be able to engage in to also speed up investment in infrastructure so that we can be more prepared should there be another rainstorm event coming up soon. Speaking of great infrastructure milestones, it was exciting to get the announcement about the light rail grant, and Valley Metro is hosting community meetings on the 22nd from 5 to 7 at Audubon, open to the public, and the following day from 8 to 10 and 5 to 7 at the Audubon Center for business owners. So would encourage people, particularly those in District 7 and 8, to attend those meetings and make sure we could do everything we can to make light rail a success for our community. Also wanted to congratulate many city departments and areas in District 8 for their very big, successful performance at the Arizona Forward Awards. Many of our buildings, like the Fay Gray Center, were recognized for outstanding design and sustainability. Our Complete Streets program, among others, received awards, so that was very exciting. I also wanted to congratulate District 8, 5 of the 10 best Mexican restaurants. So if anyone needs dining recommendations, many of them very close to here. And we wanted to recognize Kara Batdorf, who is AmeriCorps Vista and is working in our office, particularly with the refugee community, to try and make sure we do a great job of serving that community. She will also be working with our block watches and was very busy. Made it to 11 GAIN events myself this weekend. I was having a contest with my husband, who only made it to 10. So very proud to have won that particular contest, but it was a great opportunity to see the district and hear all the great things that are happening, as well as help out with that.
I want to
Thank you.
know what charity he's giving to.
I think he's going to be giving to ALAC to help our arts and culture.
All right, thank you very much, Councilwoman Gallego. And then you mentioned the 5 excellent restaurants in District 8. Did you have a favorite you want to name?
I would not be picking favorites.
All right, not picking favorites today. Okay, all right, just checking. Councilman Gates.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I lost track of the number of GAIN events I went to over the weekend, but it was great. Wonderful people out in the community at our different block watches. I think started off Saturday morning early with Vice Mayor Waring, one of my block watches that used to be in my district, but now in District 2 with redistricting, and it was great to see everyone up there, and throughout the day, a great turnout. You can see really folks are committed to keeping our streets safe, and so thank you to everyone who participated in those. On Wednesday evening, October 22nd, we'll be having another meeting of the 32nd Street, North 32nd Street group, taking a look at the plan, the draft plan that has been put together for the revitalization of that area from 6 to 7 on Wednesday night at Shea Middle School. So hope you can all come out, and would love to get your input. As well, the GAIN events continue in District 3, even though we're beyond the GAIN Day, and so we'll have another GAIN event next Saturday, the 25th, at one of the best block watches in District 3, that's Cactus Sweetwater, and that will be from 4 to 7 at Sweetwater and 32nd Street. So hope you can join us. And also just put in a plug on Sunday, got away from the GAIN events for a little while, and checked out the State Fair with my family. A lot of fun. It's a great tradition, a lot of fun out there. And for the egg fans or the non-egg fans, there's a lot to do out there, some great concerts, etc. So recommend that you all get out there and enjoy the fair. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councilman. What did you eat at the fair?
I had deep-fried Oreos and a lot of French fries.
Go Fit
Eating,
Phoenix, huh?
is that Fit Phoenix approved?
Not quite, but it's all right. It's an off day.
The good news is that at State Fair, you do a lot of walking, so that helps a little bit as well. All right, any other additional comments by members of this council? Councilman Nowakowski?
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I just want to really thank everyone who went out to the GAIN events. What a great opportunity to meet your neighbors and all the block watch leaders, Phoenix Neighborhood Patrol, Blight Busters, gang, graffiti busters, and all that. So I really want to thank you all for volunteering and organizing your neighborhoods. Last week, we had a meeting with the FAA about the recent change of flight paths on the departures of our airplanes coming out of Sky Harbor. And basically, the federal government has no requirement to perform an impact study or community outreach, but they did agree after we reached out to the FAA to come and actually have a community hearing. But I also requested that the Downtown Aviation Subcommittee address this issue too. But at this meeting, we had Councilmember Gallegos, Pastor, the mayor, and myself that were listening to. This room was jam-packed. The downstairs was full, and we had people outside. So there was over 400 people here with their concerns. And some of the concerns that came out, and I found very important, is that back in the 70s, we had an expansion of our airport that we interrupted 4 Hispanic neighborhoods that surrounded the airport on the west side of the airport. And they talked about the historic element that we lost of this Hispanic Mexican-American community. And the only thing left out there now is the Brown Sacred Heart Society, our Brown Sacred Heart Church, that's in the middle of a field, a 20-acre field. And that's sad, folks. It's really sad for the city of Phoenix. So we wanted to make sure that this doesn't happen with our historic properties in the downtown area, that we have these planes flying really low and the values of their homes are dropping. So I'm just really thankful for all those individuals coming out and coming up with solutions. We had actually 2 pilots that were there. They were kind of talking their own language. It sounded pretty good, but they came up with some solutions for the FAA to actually take into consideration. But saying all that, I think it's important for us to address this issue and have some type of a action item in our next policy meeting that we address that in the future that the city has a proposal, or we got some type of a plan to protect and to ensure communities that are impacted with federal activities such as what occurred with the historic neighborhoods in downtown Phoenix. I think even though that the federal government doesn't have to have some type of community input, we as the city of Phoenix should have some type of policy when one of our departments, if it's streets, if it's the airport, or if it's anything, that the federal government's coming in and actually gonna disturb a neighborhood, a community, that we should have some type of input from our community. So I'd like to see this in a future agenda item, that we address some type of policy where we address these types of federal actions that just occurred with our historic neighborhood, and it doesn't occur this way ever again. It's just like moving a major highway in a neighborhood, not letting the neighborhood know that there's a freeway going in your backyard. The same thing happened in the airwaves. They moved a major highway of the airplanes into people's backyards, and we should let people know what's going on. So with that, Mayor, I'd like to have this in a future policy item.
Thank you very much, and maybe we can add it to our federal agenda as well in terms of whatever appropriate legal changes we made relative to the public process. Vice Mayor Waring?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I went to 4 GAIN events this week, or this weekend, and had a good time at all of them. We had a 5th canceled, but it's been rescheduled for November 15th. It was good to see Councilman Gates out at our disputed zone. Just kidding. I know Bill didn't want to give it up in redistricting, but that's just the way it goes. But it just shows, that one's just held every year. It's always a great one. Just held in someone's backyard. They throw out a few pancakes, and we always get a good turnout. We always have a heavy police presence. Always appreciate that right over by Paradise Valley Mall. But one thing I noticed this year was there was a lot more attendance than there had been in the past. People just seemed more interested. I mean, one of them I went to on Saturday night was the biggest one I've seen since I've been doing this for the last 3 years. So it was great to see the increased attendance. Looking forward to doing the 32nd Street meeting with you, Councilman Gates, tomorrow. You've done a great job on that. I think the residents really appreciate it, and this will be a culmination of a dream, I guess, as it were. It'll be a couple-year process, and I think it's going to have a lot of tangible results. So congratulations to you for doing that, because I think you've really spearheaded that, and I'm a happy bystander tomorrow to listen to the actual report. I did want to thank someone that I see in the audience, Mario Paniagua, who is, yes, you, Mario. See, he was not paying attention. Now he is. But one thing, we do talk about the budget. I think we're going to do a little bit of that here today. I tend to harp on that. But I thought we'd have a more freewheeling discussion. So if you watch Channel 11 or you want to go to our website or Facebook, we have a show out now with Mario on it. I just asked him some questions that I thought constituents have asked me, frankly, over time, and just how does the national economy affect us and so forth. So it was a little broader in scope than what we generally do here at the actual council meetings. I was kind of happy it wasn't during the budget cycle, so we weren't sort of wedded to walking viewers through that. So if you're interested, and I guess by definition you probably are if you're watching this at home right now or you're in the audience, you might just want to check that out. I thought there was good information. I really appreciated Mario taking the time out of his busy day to do that at a time when I know he's focused on getting ready for next year. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any additional comments from members of this council? Mr. Manager, I'll just add that I know for the GAIN events that have been talked about by many council members, it takes a lot of professional staff time, a lot of time from our local law enforcement, police department, fire department. They put a lot of boots on the ground, if you will, at these various community events, literally dozens and dozens of them across the city over about a 3-week period. I know our neighborhood services department, virtually every member of that department is out at the various GAIN events on the weekend. The Parks Department is heavily involved because so many of the events are held at our community parks. Human Services is involved because many of the GAIN events are in areas where they have a presence from Human Services, either facilities or personnel. I personally think, and I think you've heard unanimously from the members of the council that were out there this past weekend, that's an investment worth making. The GAIN events at various times have ebbed and flowed in terms of the amount of local participation from the neighborhood groups and neighborhood leaders. It appears to be at a very high point right now in terms of the participation in these events. And we all agree that the relationships made at these events where new people come to the table that may not have been involved in their block watch, but they want to come for the local block party or the barbecue or whatever, meet their local police officer, meet their local neighborhood leader, get to know the system. Those are our leaders of the near future. And so the investment of time and effort by our professional staff in making GAIN a success is a good investment at a time we're making some tough budget decisions. I just want to make sure that point is well made, that is a good use of our staff time. And then finally, just also want to add on to what Councilman Gallego said. We're almost getting used to it in the city of Phoenix at this point, but we had a groundbreaking last week with the University of Arizona. A 10-story, $136 million U of A Bioscience Partnership Research Building is going to be built on the Bioscience campus in the heart of the city. That is a massive investment by the U of A, and it was done because we laid a vision a decade or so ago to make the Biosciences campus the location for world-class research, world-class medical research, world-class hospitals. That's exactly what we're getting. Right at the same time, you're going to have the Cancer Center in partnership with St. Joseph's Hospital and the U of A and the City of Phoenix is under construction, nearing its completion. At the same time, you have this new world-class research building, which is going to allow them to be able to recruit people, new researchers, not existing ones, new researchers to the University of Arizona because they'll be able to get joint appointments with the other science entities at that location. It is exactly the kind of investment that we want and need if we're going to compete for the future. It sends all the right messages about where our priorities are as a city. And we've done it enough on the bioscience campus that doesn't get quite the publicity that it used to. But those are great investments. And I really want to thank Dr. Hart and the Board of Regents and our friends at the state legislature, because they used speed funds for the building of it. The city of Phoenix provided the land, and we're effectively the landlord on the project. So it's a real example of partnership. But I know for Dr. Hart, the president of U of A, those are precious research dollars. It's a big decision to invest those research dollars right in downtown Phoenix. But U of A is truly a statewide university, and we are a very, very grateful city that they have made the decision to invest so much of their precious research dollars right in downtown Phoenix. And just shows when you lay a vision, you stick with it, what can happen. And it's exactly, certainly from having been involved from day one, frankly, even better than what we expected in terms of the intensity of and density of the built environment, as well as the quality of the research. So just want to say thank you, Dr. Hart, and all the partners that are making that a reality today. All right, next on the agenda, we have do we have consent agenda? We do not. Do we have a call for executive session?
Yes.
Vice
Mayor, in accordance with the properly posted notice and agenda, I move that the City Council pursuant to Arizona Revised Statute, Section 38-431.02.a, meet in executive session on Wednesday, November 5th, 2014 at noon in the East Conference Room, 12th floor of the Phoenix City Hall, 200 West Washington Street, Phoenix, Arizona, and on Tuesday, November 18th, 2014 at 1 p.m. in the East Conference Room, 12th floor of the Phoenix City Hall, 200 West Washington Street, Phoenix, Arizona.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Mr. City Manager, do we have a report or budget update?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, as we committed last month, we are going to have monthly updates on budget information. And so today we want to let you know we have further information on our city sales tax collections. If you look all the way to the far right, that's the increase of September 2014 over September 2013. Still a little bit weak, but it is tracking fairly close to estimates for our city sales tax. Looking in farther, the retail sales tax was up 3.8%, which is the highest gain, second highest gain in the last 5 months. Contracting continues to be a puzzle. It's down, it's up, it's down again, and so we're continuing to monitor that. Overall, our sales tax collections were within $300,000 of estimate, which is good. A little more troubling news, however, has come across since last week from the state, and the state announced its revised budget forecast last week, and it was really based on this information, that the State Joint Legislative Budget Council provided an update on state income tax. And as you know, cities and counties and towns in Arizona share revenue from the state in terms of income tax as part of a constitutional amendment that does not allow cities to collect income tax, but we share in the state revenue. And due to a couple of things that happened in 2011 and 2013, state income tax revenue has declined along with lowered corporate and individual income tax rates. And so the state shared amount has been revised downward by JLBC, and they just informed us of that on October the 7th. And the previous projections that we used did not include the impact, so this is the first time they've exposed that. What it tells us is that for next year's budget, 15-16, we will have $6.8 million less in state shared revenue than we had been told last year, and then it goes out into the future. So absent some significant upturn in state economic activity and income production in the state, we will be dealing with this. And so we will factor this impact in our 2015-16 budget projections, which are being developed now and will be presented to council in January and February. On the expenditure side, the citywide, what we call 3+9, 3 months of the year gone by, of the fiscal year, July, August, and September, which gives us as departments the ability to take a look at how we're doing 1/4 of the way into the year. And there's a very technical process that budget and research staff go through with departments where we basically start them at 0 and tell us, based on the experience so far this year, where do you think the budget needs to be? And the expectation is that the budget needs to be less. And so that's what budget and research does with departments. And that's the beginning of our preparation for the citywide community budget process in the spring. The second part on expenditures is actually going to be explained more by our Assistant City Manager in a few minutes, and that will be next month when we come back for some action on some streamlining that will come out of the core process, but that will be explained by Mr. Mahoney. And finally, I just wanted to mention, we get into the weeds sometimes, but there's a bigger picture thing that's happened as we look ahead to our schedule. Some bigger picture things happen that help us with long-term prospects. This is a picture of members of the City Council and the Mayor who opened the Mexico City Trade Office, and it is efforts like this to build our economy, to build an export economy, investments in the future that will really make a difference long-term in the viability of Phoenix's economy, and as a result, help our budget. So I wanted to congratulate Mayor, you, and the City Council for having the leadership to open this office in Mexico City and say thank you for that in the long term. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions, members of the council, for our city manager on his report? All right, we'll be hearing from you again soon on that very subject. I think we have, for this meeting, no employee service recognition announcements. I know we'll have some in the near future. Next item on the agenda is item number 3, which is our water resources drought update, and that'll be given by Rick Naymark, Deputy City Manager, and our Water Services Director, Catherine Sorensen. Obviously, this council approved the very creative, innovative partnership with the City of Tucson to prepare for future drought and protect our water position against anyone who may threaten that water position moving forward into the future. We've continually challenged the Water Department to ensure that we're doing all we can be to be as innovative as possible on water issues. It's been said so many times that there's a lot of people out there watching what's going on with water around the state, the continuing drought conditions, and as we hope and pray that we have a snowy winter in our state and region, and for the next few winters we have to prepare as if the drought is going to continue. And while there's a lot of people talking on issues of water, the City of Phoenix is acting. And I really appreciate our Water Services Department, in particular our Director, Catherine Sorensen, for really stepping out from the normal position that the city would take, a little bit more passive and be a little more active and progressive in dealing with these issues. Cities need to be at the forefront. So without further ado, let's see, Rick, I guess you'll kick it off. City Manager, kick it off. Our Water Services Drought Update. This will be an action item for this City Council.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. You know, one of the great legacies of Phoenix elected officials has been a responsible, forward-looking water policy to assure the water supply in our dry environment. And we as staff are proud to continue to support your leadership role, which was recently highlighted, as the mayor mentioned, by the progressive policy of partnering with the City of Tucson. Future mayors, councils, and staff who sit in this room 30 years from now will look back and thank us all for continuing that legacy. And today we are going to continue that tradition of looking forward to assure secure water supplies with another set of council actions which are designed to make Phoenix even more prepared and resilient. I want to introduce our Deputy City Manager, Rick Naymark, who oversees water issues for us. As you mentioned, Catherine Sorensen has done a great job as our Water Services Director, and also Cliff Neal. Cliff occupies a little-known position in the city, but also one that has a long history, and that is Water Advisor. Water law in Arizona is extremely complex, and the city's rights in that water is even more complex, and so we actually have a person whose job full-time is to monitor our water rights and state water law and national water law to protect the residents of Phoenix, and that is Cliff. With that, I'll turn it over to Rick and Catherine.
Thank you, Ed. Mayor, members of the council, we're going to talk today a little bit more about drought conditions and the potential for extreme drought actions, and also our various water resource planning activities. Back in April, you all approved 3 directions. Number 1, to pursue a partnership in Tucson, and you recently affirmed that through approving our intergovernmental agreement with Tucson water authorities to do some innovative work there. You secondly approved a direction for us to begin to work with other Colorado River stakeholders on some creative ideas for how we could do a better job of making sure that that Colorado River resource is sustainable. And thirdly, You supported our work to try to develop some ideas and policies related to improving our protection of our groundwater resources. So today we want to put a little more color on those ideas, and we have a recommendation to put our money where our mouth is and put some money into our capital improvement program to implement some of the important creative ideas. And also we want to give you a little more detail on some general directions we'd like to pursue working with partners in the water community to better protect our groundwater resources. So I'm going to turn it over to Catherine and Cliff, and they're kind of going to bounce back and forth a little bit, talking about some of these projects, and then I'll wrap up at the end.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council. So as Rick mentioned, we're here to give you an update on the drought and some of our efforts towards resiliency. Despite the recent rains and catastrophic flooding that caused for some of our residents, we are still in a drought. The drought's been going on about 14 years. You can see from this chart that we continue. Things have improved a little bit, but drought conditions remain throughout the state. So the Bureau of Reclamation is projecting significant chances of shortage on the Colorado River over the next couple of years. You can see here they're projecting about a 36% chance of a shortage declaration in 2016 and nearly 60% chance of a shortage declaration in 2017. Now, as we've discussed in previous sessions, we do not expect that a shortage declaration would have a direct impact on the city of Phoenix because we have planned well. But Phoenix, as the capital of Arizona, as the largest city in the state, we also look to regional impacts, and we are concerned about some of those. If shortage is declared on the Colorado River, it brings a degree of uncertainty that Arizona has really never had to grapple with before, and uncertainty in and of itself can sometimes be disruptive. There is the potential for the reduction in deliveries to agriculture and other water uses that are lower in priority within the Central Arizona Project system, and there's also the potential for increased water costs. So you hear me talk a lot about the Colorado River and resiliency on the Colorado River. You don't hear me talk as much about resiliency on the Salt and Verde River system, and so I wanted to take the time to explain that a little bit. So you see on this chart the city of Phoenix, and you can see that there's a green area and then a tan area. The green area are lands that are within the Salt River Valley Water Users Association, commonly known as SRP. The lands within that green section have rights to Salt and Verde River water, but that water can only be used within those boundaries. It cannot be used in the tan areas. So the green areas, we refer to those as being on project, meaning that they are within the Salt River Project. The Salt River Project is an interesting project, and it's an inherently resilient system. It is governed through a board of directors of the Salt River Valley Water Users Association, and they have control over allocations that are given to the lands throughout the valley. So when there is drought on this system and when reservoir levels are declining over time, they can dial back on those allocations to protect the reservoirs and to ensure the availability of water in future years. SRP has also invested very heavily in redundant well capacity so that even as they are lowering surface water allocations, they are increasing groundwater allocations to provide deliveries to their customers. In addition to all of this, Phoenix's rights within the Salt River Project system are very senior compared to other communities. And so the water that we get from the Salt and Verde River system tends to be very resilient. Unfortunately, the opposite is kind of true on the Colorado River system. And again, it comes down to an issue of governance. The way that the Colorado system is governed is actually through international treaties, interstate compacts, a few court cases, federal contracts, and there's no easy way to dial back on allocations to protect the reservoirs. And this really enhances rather than mitigates the risk on the system.
In addition to that, it is basically an annual use it or lose it allocation system. There are some small exceptions to this, but they're very small. And what it means is that throughout the lower basin, throughout Arizona, California, and Nevada, we allocate and use every single acre foot that comes through the system every single year. We rarely leave anything behind to protect the reservoirs from shortage conditions in future years.
Good afternoon. Just to cover a little bit on some of the modeling that we did an analysis to get an idea of what the level of risk that the Phoenix faces with respect to water supplies over the longer term. As Catherine indicated, the near term, there's a pretty good chance of a shortage on the Colorado River system, but the impacts on Phoenix are non-existent for years out. But we, as water supply planners, want to make sure we're covered as far out as we possibly can. So we did some long-term modeling analysis. We looked at over 650 water supply and demand scenarios to see what the worst case might look like. The modeling that we did was based on a starting point using the current reservoir conditions. In other words, the reservoir levels as they're declined right now. And surprisingly, those who do modeling know that that's the biggest impact on water supply and water planning analysis is where do you start? You start with it full, do you start with it empty? And so we're starting with it as it is today. The period that we modeled is a 46-year period from 2015 through 2060. The water supply scenarios that we used were based on observed hydrology, 107 years of observed hydrology from 1906 through 2012. And then on top of that, we took a look at what would happen, what's that observed hydrology adjusted for climate change based on some of the work that the Bureau of Reclamation has done. The good news is in the vast majority of these scenarios, we don't really have a problem. We have enough water supply. We have senior rights for water supplies. We have buffers in place that we talked about the last time we approached you. But there is worst case scenarios that come up. But looking at about the 3 percentile worst case scenario, we see that, as Catherine indicated, the Salton Verde system, we're well positioned. We have plenty of water, we think, to withstand anything on that system. The Colorado River system, we do need some additional measures to take to make sure that we don't run into problems going forward.
So although the scenarios that put Phoenix in a situation of not being able to meet demands on the Colorado side are extreme and very unlikely, as a desert city, it's obviously our responsibility to protect our economy and our quality of life. And so we're looking at actions to improve resiliency really as an insurance policy against the very worst case scenarios. So some of the efforts that we're looking at, and I'll go through these at a high level, and then Cliff will go through some of these as examples. Yes, Mayor.
Quick question, Catherine. So you mentioned a few times that if shortage is declared on the Colorado, the relative minimal impact it would have on the city of Phoenix. What I would like to hear is, then what impact would it have on others in our region, since Phoenix doesn't exist in a vacuum? We exist as part of a larger community and state.
Right, Mayor, City Council. So if you, what would happen if under a shortage declaration is a category of water would be cut from the Central Arizona Project, and that category of water is called excess water. The users that depend on excess water today are generally agriculture, some here in Maricopa, but mostly in Pinal County, and then some turf and irrigation uses, and then the Central Arizona Groundwater Replenishment District, which relies on excess supplies for groundwater replenishment purposes. So it would not be a direct impact to any of the cities. There would also be less water available for the Arizona Water Banking Authority. I neglected to mention that earlier, but no direct impact on any of the municipal users is anticipated at this time.
Thank you.
So some of the actions that we're looking at, we've talked a lot about the Tucson Partnership and Exchange. That is in process. We are also looking at storing additional Colorado River water underground here in local aquifers. That is some of our own allocation that we would be tucking away in local aquifers, in addition to what we're doing in partnership with Tucson. We are...
Who owns those aquifers, or who's in control of them?
Mayor, so the state allocates groundwater and gives out permits for well pumping throughout the Phoenix Active Management Area. So various entities have various rights to pump that water, and we'll get into a little bit of that in more detail in a few slides. We'll talk a little bit more about groundwater. We are also in very high level and very preliminary conversations with entities that have higher priority rights on the Colorado River. We're not interested in bringing in water from those higher priority uses for growth. We feel as though we have the water that we need for growth. But we are interested in having conversations about dry year lease options. So in a really catastrophic year when Colorado River allocations are cut very dramatically, maybe there would be a potential partnership for a year or two to kind of shore up Phoenix's supply. But those conversations are very preliminary at this time.
And as a layperson, does that mean potentially buying water rights from users above us in the system?
Mayor, I would say borrowing. How
Borrowing
about that?
them, okay,
Yes.
fair enough, all right, good.
Okay.
Councilman Gates.
Yeah, and Mayor, just to follow up, and that would be just other users of Colorado River water?
Mayor, Councilmember Gates, yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
We're also looking at partnering with SRP and other interested stakeholders on watershed protection and restoration. This would mainly be focused on the Salt River side. Part of being resilient on the Colorado side is being resilient on the Salt River side. And we want to make sure that the Salt River system is as productive as possible. And so we're looking at some of those efforts as well. We're also in very high level and preliminary conversations about the Colorado River System Conservation Program and the possibility of expanding that so that more work can be done in that area. And again, the idea behind that is to enter into arrangements, voluntary arrangements for others to reduce their use on the Colorado River to provide that resiliency to buffer reservoir levels behind Lake Mead.
Thank you.
We're also in conversations with the Department of Water Resources and the Central Arizona Project to possibly store some of Phoenix's unused Colorado River water in Lake Mead to buffer those reservoir levels. So Cliff is going to go through a couple of these in a little more detail and talk about some of the uses or some of the ideas we have for resiliency in this area.
Try to keep going at it, but
Yeah.
the dry year lease options, as you phrase it, sort of borrowing water rights during the worst of the drought, it's an important point to make that Phoenix's motivation in doing this is only for drought conditions, not for growth. There's traditionally been a tension between agricultural uses and urban uses and fear that one entity is going to try to take away water rights for urban or growth in the urban areas. But when it comes to drought, ag and urban interests, we're in the same boat. We got to partner together.
Yeah, Mayor, thank you. That's exactly right. And we've learned through experience that the only way that these types of arrangements move forward is if everyone is comfortable, if there's a voluntary arrangement, and it has to be an arrangement that benefits both communities and both economies. And so that's the kind of model that we would look towards. And you're absolutely right. We're not looking towards this model for water for growth. We're looking at this model for resiliency in worst case scenarios.
Thank you.
So taking a look a little bit more detail on some of the items that Catherine had on that last list. The first one, storing more water underground. The idea, and this is first bullet would be to store in local groundwater recharge facilities. This picture, by the way, is a picture from SRP's website. It's a picture of the Granite Reef Underground Storage Project out east of our area here. City of Phoenix invested over 20 years ago in the construction of this recharge project. We own about a quarter of the capacity at that facility. And our intent is to start storing a little bit more in that facility every year, a little more of our Colorado River water. Basically, the way it works is you take the water, you put it out on the spreading basin, it percolates down into the ground and recharges the groundwater aquifers. So it's a pretty simple concept. Secondly on that list is the Tucson agreement that you all talked about earlier and you approved last month, or earlier this month, I guess. Under that situation, the City of Tucson and Metropolitan Domestic Water Improvement District have built spreading basin recharge facilities similar to the one you see here. In that case, we will buy some of our Colorado River water from the CAP, transport it down to Tucson, and store it in those facilities. In the future, when we need to recover that for storage, for shortage purposes, we will contact City of Tucson and Metro Water. They'll pump the water back out of the ground. We'll exchange that water that they've recovered for us for some of their CAP water that they'll leave in the system that we can take right at our treatment plants up here in Maricopa County. That saves us the cost of constructing new recovery facilities, and it also provides kind of a benefit to the City of Tucson. While we store our water down there, their aquifers, their levels are raised up, so that's a benefit to them. Basically a win-win concept for everybody. And again, the primary reason is for recovery to offset future shortages to Colorado River water. This one, as Catherine indicated, is still very preliminary. We are just starting discussions. We're not sure exactly where they'll end up. We hope they'll be successful. We think they'll be successful, but just want to make sure you know it's just very preliminary. In this case, City will work with CAP and Department of Water Resources to develop agreements. It requires a complex agreement because, as Catherine indicated, the Colorado River water is fully allocated. Every year, if we don't use our water, it goes down to the next person below us. So it requires agreement by those folks below us to say, if we do not use some of our water and we want to leave that up in Lake Mead, those folks have to say, well, okay, we won't take it. So it's gonna take some complex discussions, some complex negotiations, and the intent on this is that we would possibly use some of our the water that we have stored in the new conservation space in the Salt and Verde system, or some of our groundwater recharge credits that we already have stored underground now.
I have a quick question from Councilman Gates.
Yeah, not being a hydrologist, maybe you can just talk about the evaporation issues related to storing it in Lake Mead as opposed to having it in groundwater storage here in the Phoenix area.
Well, there's clearly some issues with that. The one thing to keep in mind, though, is if you do store water underground, there is what they call a cut to the aquifer, so there is a loss factor in that as well. But if you do leave water up in Lake Mead or in any lake, if we leave it up in Roosevelt, our new conservation space water up in Roosevelt, there's a 3 to 5% loss factor to evaporation every year. So there is that. So the idea behind this concept is that we would leave it up there as long as it is needed to help make the reservoir healthy. Once it's healthy, we pull it back down and we put it somewhere where we can actually use it and make sure it's not going to be lost forever.
As a follow-up, if I could. With the 3 to 5% evaporation that occurs in Lake Mead, it still may be more efficient to do that than it would be to create a recharge basin, which could be a lot more expensive when it comes to capital costs. Either way, you lose some water. The question is, which is more efficient, or more cost-effective?
Mayor, Councilman DeCiccio, that's correct. And in fact, they're two totally different strategies. They're both related to resiliency, but if you think about it, we could bring water down out of Lake Mead and store it. That then affects the reservoir in Lake Mead and potentially puts you in greater danger of shortage, ironically. The other strategy is to leave the water up there and be subject to these losses. We want to pursue both. We think that both are valid under the right circumstances, and both should be part of kind of a general basket of resiliency. And then which one we actually pursue in a given year would kind of depend on all of those factors that you mentioned.
Thank you.
So then continuing on to expanding our groundwater pumping capabilities, as we've indicated, groundwater is our supply of last resort. We've really, I think the city has done an excellent job over the past decades of transitioning from use of groundwater to use of surface water. The state of Arizona has encouraged that, incentivized that through, and made it, pointed you to use it with respect to regulations. So we've done a good job of that. We use less than 5% of our demands are met using groundwater. But it is a supply that's there in the future to offset future shortages if we need to, and we do need to continue working to increase our ability to pump that water out of the ground. So the couple of things that we've got listed here are to construct additional aquifer storage and recovery wells. Those are wells that during years when we have extra water, we can put it into the aquifer, and in years when we don't have extra water, we can pull it back out. So it's a recharge project itself that we have started working on those. We'll be hopefully constructing some additional ones of those. The last bullet on there is to work on shared well partnerships with the Salt River Project and others, those who have wells in the system, that we can kind of work with them so they can use it when we don't need the water. But if there's a shortage on the Colorado River, we can go to them and say, hey, can you cut back your usage so we can use that to meet our demands. So,
So, and groundwater really is kind of, it's an additional layer of our resiliency efforts. It's important to note that, you know, in the midst of probably what it has been its worst drought ever, California is learning, perhaps too late, the importance of regulating groundwater. And Arizona was way ahead of that curve. Arizona passed major legislation to protect groundwater about 35 years ago, the 1980 Groundwater Management Act. But there's still a lot more work to be done in this area. The Phoenix Active Management Area continues to be in an overdraft situation, meaning that we pull more water out of the aquifer than we put back in. And, you know, Phoenix was instrumental and a leader in passing and helping to support the 1980 Groundwater Management Act. We hope that Phoenix continues in that leadership role regarding groundwater management. Because if we are going to ensure groundwater as, or the availability of groundwater as our supply of last resort, as a cornerstone of our resiliency efforts, then we do need to protect the aquifer, prevent areas of localized decline, and protect surface water that has been stored underground. The problem is, and the work that remains to be done, is that under current rules, an entity is allowed to pull water out of the aquifer a very far distance away from where that water is recharged back into the aquifer. And that does contribute to areas of localized decline, and we continue to see that in our aquifer today. It also creates a paradigm where someone can actually drill wells close to where someone else has recharged water and pull that water out. So unless this paradigm is changed, over the long term, Phoenix really does not have assurance that the water that it has stored will be there for future generations. And that's obviously really important to us. We want to make sure that what we put into the ground is there for future generations.
Well, Mayor, may I ask a quick question on that?
Councilman.
The recharge basins that we currently have, I mean, I was part of the one that we did out in Gilbert back in the 90s. Where are they? Are they near other places where people could pull water from them?
Mayor, Councilmember DeCiccio, so Phoenix owns about 25% of the Granite Reef underground storage project. And yeah, that is not close to where our pumping occurs. And that's why we are looking at partnerships with SRP to ensure that that water is both recharged and then pumped back out in a very sustainable manner. Other recharge facilities really are more the ones that Cliff was talking about, where we're recharging and recovering within the same well. So you can actually run a well basically in reverse and push water back into the aquifer and then pull it back out. So Phoenix has relied more on that type of strategy, particularly in the northeast portions of the city.
Yeah, and then the reason I'm asking that is that when you're talking about changing a state law like that, I mean, you really have to think it out. And the question really comes down to what recharge basins do we have today that could be at risk that someone could be pumping from? I don't know if we have any, do we?
So, Mayor, Councilmember DeCiccio, what I would say in broad terms is that to the west of us is a cone of depression in the aquifer that continues to grow.
Is that the Roosevelt District?
No, it is the Luke Cone of Depression is what it's called. And it continues to grow, and it continues to impact the future availability of our groundwater and our stored water. We have these concerns throughout the basin, not just Phoenix, other entities as well. And so we have been in conversations with other stakeholders to see if there are some ways that we can move the ball forward and continue to ensure sustainable management of the aquifer.
The Luke Cone, where is that? I assume that's by Luke Air Force Base. And how close is that? And I guess it could be considered a water plume. Where would that, I mean, where would the extent of that area be? And how far east would that go?
Mayor, Councilmember DeCiccio, I'm sorry, I don't have a map here in front of me. I'd be more than happy to bring that forward, and we could discuss that. What I would say, though, is that in general terms, we are concerned about the state of the aquifer today. We want to ensure sustainable management and that we achieve safe yield in the aquifer. But really what we're focused on is the future. Because the city of Phoenix, because it decided to get off the pump and to be a predominantly surface water system, traditionally has not stored a lot of water underground. And so we have not been as active about influencing these policies and procedures to protect that water because we haven't stored that much. What I'm saying is that moving forward, if this becomes part of our resiliency efforts, and we do store more water underground, then we would recommend that the city also take at least some incremental steps to better protect that, so that the money that our ratepayers are spending is well guarded for the future. So there are definitely some problems today, but what we're really focused on is making sure that moving forward, we look at these rules and regulations to make sure that our investment is protected.
So what you're doing is you're planning for what something could be. And in regards to that, the reason I'm asking is that whenever you're talking about this, it's a lot more complicated than just saying, hey, we're going to just pass a law. I mean, you're dealing with water rights, you're dealing with a considerable, you're dealing with a lot. The other deals, I mean, the other part would be you're not going to be recharging in an area that has had a lot of farming if you're going to have pesticide problems too. My guess is you're going to be finding those basins that might be a little bit more pure. I mean, you wouldn't be around 52nd and McDowell and do any recharging there for other reasons. So, I mean, the idea then would maybe have you come back, I would hope, and give us an idea of where you think these recharge basins could be.
Mayor, Councilmember DeCiccio, absolutely. We'd be happy to go over this in more detail. Really what we're looking for today, and I'll let Rick take over, but really what we're looking for today is what I would call high-level policy guidance, so that as we move forward and have those very complicated conversations, and you're right, they are really complex, we at least have an overarching policy that we're trying to abide by, knowing that the specifics are complicated, the low-hanging fruit has already been picked, and whatever arrangements we would come up with, we would need to bring back to the council.
And Mayor, Councilman DeCiccio, just to add one more thing to that. Specific projects that we do, recharge, or any of the projects are described, would be part of our city's capital improvement program. So you would know, where are we planning to do this kind of activity when we're getting ready to do it, because we'd be constructing a project or getting your approval to enter an agreement with SRP to inject into a particular well or draw from a particular well. So you'll know that at that time. But we have a set of overarching policies that we think we need to work with as we move forward to help really provide a little more strength to an act that has served us extremely well, and a set of policies that's served this state and this city very, very well over time. But we've learned some things over time, and now we're facing unprecedented potential, unlikely, but potential severe shortage on the Colorado River, and we need to start thinking differently than the way we were thinking in 1980. So let me just talk about the recommendations, and we're happy to answer any other questions. We have basically two recommendations. One is all of the items that were on that checklist related to the Colorado River do come at a cost. It costs money to develop these recharge facilities. Sometimes it costs money to purchase water from somebody else, or to take water and then store it somewhere. And so we would like to do something that's a little unprecedented, which is to, instead of just have our water capital improvement program focused on treatment and delivery of water, that we want to add, and also to purchase raw water, which we do. We want a segment of our capital improvement program to be focused on this Colorado River Resiliency Program. Now, our water CIP is roughly $150 million, and what we're asking you to do is to approve our recommendation to set aside approximately $5.5 million a year over the next several years in our water CIP so that we have the ability to move forward with the more particular set of projects. Obviously, some of this will go right away to the Tucson partnership, but over time it go to some of these other projects as well. And then secondly, we'd ask you to support in our moving forward in dialogue with all of the interested parties out there and other stakeholders in the water community to support enhanced aquifer management policies that help to better protect groundwater and better protect the water that we currently and in the future would store underground. And in particular, we're interested in pursuing incentives that would encourage folks to recharge in the same area where the recovery would occur, disincentives for recovery far from where recharge occurred, just as Catherine had described is occurring now. And just in general, find ways to better protect, and it really answers the mayor's question about people being able to pull out of the aquifer, better protect recharged water from being pumped by others. Because if we're going to recharge it for our future, we want to make sure that water is there for our use in the future should we have these severe drought conditions. So those are our recommendations today. We'd be happy to answer any further questions you might have.
All right, any additional questions, Councilman Nowakowski?
Mayor?
Oh, Councilman Williams, you go first.
Oh, well, thank you, Mayor. First of all, I just want to say that I support this in a conceptual way. These are very, very complex issues, and what we have heard today is very good. It has a lot of information, but it really doesn't have specific details. And I understand we have the agreement with Tucson. I see the $5 million going partly towards that. But, I mean, I will support this going forward, but I am leery of giving full support across the board until we have more specifics and they have dealt with some of these entities and find out where not only other cities, but other states and other parts of this region are coming from, and their willingness to join us in this effort. It's a very competitive process. There are so many needs and so many different attitudes on how this should be accomplished. I'm just a little concerned to just give carte blanche to give staff freedom to just go do whatever. So I guess I think it's a great first step, but I really look forward to them coming back, making sure that we're very aware of the progress on each one of those points that they make, and that they seek further approval from the council, because I think this is the future of Phoenix, and it is very important that this is not only done right, but done in a manner that ensures that there will be water long term. It will be water that is a quality that is affordable to use and safe to use, and that it will serve all of our purposes. So I guess I just wanted to make that,
Thank you very much, Councilman Williams, and I know you serve as representing the city on the Municipal Water Association Board, AMWA, and so you are advanced from all of us in terms of your knowledge on the issue. Thank you for your patience and listening to what obviously was a review for you, and thank you for your leadership on water issues. Councilman Nowakowski?
Mayor, first of all, I just want to thank staff for creating this, looking into creating a policy to protect our groundwater and our storage underground water. It's something so important for the future and the growth of the city of Phoenix. My question is, where is the $5.5 million funding coming from? Is that from the CIP, or is it from other funds, or how are we expected to get this funding from?
So, Mayor, Councilmember Nowakowski, so it's $5.5 million on average is what we're proposing as a section in our capital improvement program. So all the money comes, just as is true for the rest of our capital improvement program, the money comes from our water users, from our rates. The way that we have it programmed, actually this next year we're looking at spending closer to $6 million. About a little more than half of that was already in the capital improvement program funding in the form of annual storage and recovery well capacity. That was already programmed, but a little less than half of that 6 million is new dollars. And moving forward, we would anticipate that most of this is new dollars that we're adding to the capital improvement program. Now, that being said, we do not anticipate the need to ask for a rate increase this year. So we do not anticipate that this will affect rates this year. And in fact, we are looking at refinancing some of our outstanding water bonds, and we're expecting that the savings from that will be able to adequately fund this effort for some time to come. So it is money in our capital improvement program. It is money that our ratepayers pay. That's the source of the funding. But we do not anticipate that this is going to impact water rates this year.
Mayor, just a follow-up
Councilman
question. So if we're going to refinance our bonds, I think I would like to have more information on that and see what that looks like. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilman Gallego?
You mentioned fallowing of agricultural fields is something that would be a possibility for very short-term durations. It seems like an odd choice then to put it in the capital improvement plan, which seems to send a signal to me that this is a long-term strategy that we'll be doing regularly. So,
Mayor, Councilwoman Gallego, yeah, I can see the confusion on that. You're right, and for specific fallowing programs, especially if they're very short in duration, we would probably look to operating funds to use for that type of effort, because it would be short-term, and normally we use capital funding for long-term efforts. But as I said, those types of conversations are just very preliminary right now, and they're just an example of the kinds of efforts that we would pursue as part of the resiliency program. Where the funding would come from, be it operating or capital, would have to be a conversation we would have at that time.
Just to be clear, that was part of the plan for drought planning and protecting our water rights. Not all of them were specifically going to be part of this resiliency fund, which is a capital program. Okay, Councilwoman.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, other questions?
I do have
Please.
further questions. Okay, so, and I would, if we spent 5.5 million and a lot of it went to agricultural fouling, I think there are many here who would have concerns about that. So we just now have it on the record.
Yeah.
That is not the direction where we're going. In terms of measures of success, outcomes, obviously there's acre feet of water, but how will we measure success for this program?
Mayor, Councilman Gallego, you know, it's an interesting question, because really what we're looking at is forming an insurance policy for events that we really hope never happen. And so I guess what I would say is that success is measured by us actually continuing reliable deliveries to our customers and providing that certainty for economic development here in Phoenix without failing. That's really the measure of success for this program. That's what we're trying to achieve. We would have to look, I guess, at specifics moving forward. You know, we could look at things like the amount of water stored in local aquifers and in Tucson as well, some other types of measurements. But ultimately, our success is defined by being able to continue reliable deliveries.
Are there lessons we can take from other cities, from Denver, Salt Lake, even New York, when it's obviously very different tools that are on the table here, but some of the programs and the supply challenges, there are things I think we can learn from forced to faucets and...
Yeah, Mayor, Councilwoman Gallego, absolutely. And the good news is that in the industry, there's a lot of good thinkers out there. There's a lot of different perspectives and approaches, and we participate very actively in those national committees so that we are up to date on some of the ideas coming forward from other utilities and have regular conversations with them as well. So yeah, absolutely, there's a lot we can learn from others.
Okay, because I think I agree with Councilwoman Williams that it'd be good to have a little bit more meat, a little bit more surety. There's some good options, and then even within some of the options, I think there's healthy forest projects that the council would be more excited about than others. And so before we create this fund, I mean, it'd just be good to have a little bit more understanding of where this money is going, because we have so many needs and capital is so very sparse.
Mayor, Councilwoman Gallego, so if I could just address that last point. Yes, so we do anticipate that over the next several years, most of the money in this fund would go towards purchasing our currently unused Colorado River water and storing it in local and in Tucson area aquifers, and in the expansion of our annual storage and recovery capacity. That's where we anticipate most of the money will go over the next several years. And that is because these other efforts are really in preliminary planning stages. And we would be bringing those forward as intergovernmental agreements for the council to review, understand the details of, and then hopefully approve as they come forward.
Great, because I understand we will vote on the capital improvement program, but also tried to
Right.
remove a bridge over 7th Street from the capital improvement program, and it was more difficult than I thought, so once it's in, there is some momentum there, so. And I'm sure Councilman Gates
Yeah.
will come up with new tools for us to do that.
If we vote to create this fund, obviously the components of what the individual project would still come back for individual votes of this council as part of the water CIP in the future. So this council would still have decision-making authority on the specifics of what this fund would, but it does create the opportunity to vote on these resiliency projects that otherwise wouldn't be in there. Councilman DeCiccio?
Thank you, Mayor, and I want to thank you and Councilman Gates for bringing this forward and for staff. Water is a critical component in our economy, whether we're Arizona, and it was based all the way from Carl Hayden days to John Rhodes' days. So the questions I've got here, and it goes along the lines of what Councilwoman Williams and Gallego was bringing forward, and I think they bring up some really good points, and we had this discussion in my office too. There is no plan yet on how to spend the money. When we talked in the office, Catherine, you said that there wasn't going to be any, you were going to come back to us with some specifics of how this was going to be done. Is that correct?
Mayor, Councilman DeCiccio, actually, I'm sorry, I must have given you the wrong impression. We have scheduled out exactly what we want to spend this money on over the next several years. What I was referring to is that in general terms, we would like to be able to pursue a basket of opportunities, not knowing exactly which one is going to bring the best benefit for the city, but to be able to pursue them as a broad effort in resiliency. But we do actually, we have programmed into our capital improvement program exactly how we want to spend this money over the next several years. So I apologize for that
Well,
misunderstanding.
yeah, because I didn't see it in this report then. I mean, the conversation we had, my understanding was going to be a little bit more broad, that we're going to be setting up a fund, which I like the idea of doing. I think it's a great idea to do that. I mean, what we're preparing for realistically is a black swan, correct? I mean, that's really what we're doing.
Correct.
And so once in a 10,000-year occurrence, or 8,000-year, whenever it happened last, which I'm not quite sure, but it does occur, and it's more than just that. It's also sending a strong message to the people that drive our economy that we're looking forward with water, because it's been such a critical component, and I think you need to do that. And I'm big on creating sinking funds and creating stability in a system. But the question I've got, I want to go back to that then too, is when we were talking about the specifics of this, how come I sort of didn't get that in the meeting?
Mayor, Councilman DeCiccio, I apologize. I
It's all
probably
right.
didn't explain it well, but there is
Or I
some-
didn't hear it correctly. I mean, it could happen one
no,
of two ways.
I'll own it. But there is a little bit of confusion here, and I can tell, and I apologize for that, because normally the council approves our capital improvement program a little bit later in the year.
Mhm.
And so what will happen is we will come forward in January, and there will be there will be a presentation at the Transportation and Infrastructure Subcommittee on our capital improvement program as part of our rate setting process, so that the council can clearly see how our capital improvement program impacts our current and future rates. And then the council is given an opportunity to vote on the capital improvement program itself. And so what we're asking for here is more general guidance that the council would support the creation of this type of effort in our capital improvement program. Then we would bring the specifics forward for approval at a later time.
That's what I heard. So, I mean, we're not approving a specific plan right now, is correct?
Mayor, Councilman DeCiccio, yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
So in that then too, because you have other ideas that are out there on how to preserve water and how to create this resiliency that we're looking to accomplish here. I mean, I see Cheryl Lombard from the Nature Conservancy. She has some great ideas as well. And I would really encourage you to engage people like her and others on what would be the best path for the city of Phoenix. It may not be this storage plan. It may not be because of the capital costs. It may not be the Lake Mead model. There might be other ideas out there that would allow us to create, a fund which would be able to build up, then later create a much more stable supply of water coming to the city of Phoenix and the region too. So I like the idea of being able to put aside money. I think that's something that any entity should do, whether it's private or public. When you talk about incentives, what do you envision about incentives and disincentives? What do you mean by that?
Mayor, Councilmember DeCiccio, there are very preliminary conversations at this time about what those incentives and disincentives might be. I know that there are conversations with the Department of Water Resources about that, but I am not sure where the department has come down in terms of actual specifics. But it would be ideas like, Cliff mentioned earlier, when you store water underground and then want to recover it, there's a 5% cut to the aquifer. There might be, we could look at policies we could look at policies to increase that cut to the aquifer, for example, if you're recharging in one part of the aquifer but pulling the water back out very far away. So maybe instead of a 5%, you pay a slightly higher premium to create that incentive or disincentive, as the case may be.
From your location.
But we don't have those specifics yet, and those conversations are yet to occur.
This really just sets us forward and looking forward at where we need to be as a city. The other, I didn't hear that there was a 5% cut on the aquifer. So I mean, it's automatically better for us to use Lake Mead then. If you've got a 3% evaporation versus a 5%
well,
on a recharge
Mayor,
basin,
Councilmember
that has a
DeCiccio,
capital cost.
So actually, no, because the way that Lake Mead works is if we were to store water in Lake Mead, actually, under the mechanisms that exist today, we would lose 8% the first year, and that's through contract among the 7 states. And then you lose 3% a year on top of that. So there are some advantages to storing the water in aquifers here, even though there's a 5% cut. Again, they're kind of two very different paths, and we would just like to be able to look at pursuing both.
You want to look at both and see which one's, I mean, because realistically, your payback is it's almost 2 years, just a little over 2 years. In regards to the state legislation, I'm just not ready to, I want to get the specifics on that. I don't feel comfortable with, coming up with a plan and not knowing what the plan is, voting on a plan and a direction without knowing what the details are, along with Councilwoman Williams, which she had mentioned, and I believe Gallego as well. I just like to know what it is. And I think, let's see, that's pretty much it. Thanks, Mayor.
Councilwoman Gallego and then Councilman Gates.
I think the councilman talked about some of the cone of depression, and have we identified whether any of the land subsidence issues we've had in Phoenix are at all related to water supply or would be improved by anything?
Mayor, Councilwoman Gallego, I do not know the answer to that question, but we'd be happy to look into that and get back with you.
That would be great. When he was asking the question about the extent of the cone, I was thinking, I think it's maybe Councilman Valenzuela's issues,
Right.
the district where Thomas.
So, Mayor, Councilwoman, in general terms, subsidence can occur where there has been a withdrawal of groundwater, and it is next to bedrock. So that what happens is the alluvial soils from which you're withdrawing the water move at a different rate than the bedrock does, and generally that can contribute to subsidence. But I do not have the specifics on that case or in general. So I want to look into it and get back with you on that, if that's
Wonderful.
okay.
And that is a streets question primarily, but if we could have additional benefits from work we're doing, that is
Yeah.
certainly a story we would want to tell.
Okay.
So I have an area of my district where, near Fire Station 57, where there's regularly a lake. And so people would want me to ask, is there any opportunity to study urban stormwater capture as part of this?
Yes, Councilwoman Gallego, Mayor Councilwoman Gallego. Actually, this is a request that Councilman Gates put to us in writing recently as a result of the recent storms about what we might or might not be able to do with stormwater capture. And we are bringing a report back to subcommittee in either November or December, I can't remember, about this particular issue. The issue with stormwater has two big components that we need to think our way through. One is actually prior rights. Who has the right to that water? And another issue has to do with the EPA rules for treatment and also the cost of delivery of that water. So we got to work through those issues to understand them better, and we are planning to come back and do a full report to the subcommittee and also to the full mayor and council, if you'd like,
And the
on that
subcommittee is
subject.
Transportation and Infrastructure?
Yes, that's correct.
Great. Thank you.
Councilman Gates and Vice Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I think at this point, I propose I'll throw a motion out on the table, see if there's a second, and then I have some questions and comments.
Please.
The motion that I'm going to make at this point, I'm not going to make the full recommendation here, but just instead make a motion at this time to create a Colorado River resiliency section in the Water Capital Improvement Program that would be funded at approximately $5.5 million on average per year to fund projects focused on water supply resiliency.
We have a motion. We have a second? Councilman. Additional comments?
Thank you. Yes. Thank you. I mean, again, this is, I'm thrilled by the work here, thrilled, frankly, by the discussion that we're having today. I think this is a great example of what, what this body can do and the type of discussions that we can have. I've heard, I think, like a lot of my colleagues here, both of our senators talk about, the U.S. senators talk about the importance of addressing this issue of our water supply, and I would, maybe be so bold to say that this is the type of action that they'd like to see, cities and towns across the state of Arizona engaging in. There's no question. I'm a little disappointed that we didn't get a black swan flying across on the PowerPoint, but I was happy to hear Councilman DeCiccio reference that, because that's right. I mean, again, the point is we've done a good job of water planning, but this is to prepare for that worst-case scenario. It's the right thing to do, especially when we're asking for employers, large companies from other states to invest literally millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars. They want that certainty, and I think this is one step further in that direction. We have, because of the leadership of prior councils and prior city manager, et cetera, a wonderful water capital program. We got enough. We've got more than enough, because we were frankly prepared for more growth. So I think focusing our capital improvement, at least to some extent, on water supply itself and having the water and having it when we need it makes a lot of sense. And yes, there are a lot of details to be worked out, but I think at this point, bringing it forward, getting the sense of the council that there's a support of putting, approximately $5.5 million aside makes a lot of sense. I would like to see us focus a little bit more on conservation, though. We're not talking about that. I think I've raised this before. I believe, and again, I know California is in a different situation, but I believe the mayor of LA just recently called upon over in LA to reduce their use as a city government by 20% by 2017. No one's asking for that. No one's saying that we need to do it to that extent, but I think we need to be looking at ourselves as well. And I'd like to see a little bit more of a focus on that. But, having said that, and with the assurance that this is not going to affect water rates, I obviously will be supporting this item. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. We do have a member of the public that wanted to provide testimony. Ms. Greta Rogers, did you provide testimony on this item?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Greta Rogers, and I commend you for addressing this critical, serious, life-saving subject. None of us, no animal on earth can live without water. And I also want to thank the City of Phoenix for hiring Ms. Sorensen as our water director. In all the years I've been here, 42 of them, going on 43, we have never had in the City of Phoenix, to the best of my knowledge, a really qualified director of water services. This lady, by education, by training, and by depth of experience, is probably one of the premier water directors in the United States. And we have a jewel. Be grateful and be respectful. I would like to make the following comments with regard to this. First of all, I understand this is a preliminary step. This is a major project policy change in the operation and delivery of water services in the city of Phoenix. And I'm glad we're doing it. My questions that I wrote down are, is there a Metro Water Conservancy plan and cooperative use sharing plan, and who receives the recharged water? I don't want an answer. I want this to be thought about if it hasn't been. And also, we need to be a metro area. We need to work with the other major cities in this metro area. There's some 4 million people, approximately, plus or minus, who live in this greater area. So I think we need a cooperative plan too. And we need to teach all of us, each individual one of us, how to use water wisely. I grew up on a well, and my mother, I can still hear it ringing in my ears. God bless her soul. Turn off the water. She was sure the well would go dry someday. It never did. But one of the things we learned, and this is easy to do, when you're brushing your teeth, you're actually doing it, turn off the water. It isn't doing you any good. Turn it on when you're ready to rinse, and then turn it off when you're finished. Use of water has to be carefully and with value used by each one of us, particularly living in a desert climate. Also, there has to be regulation for use of irrigation and sprinkling use water, and enforced. It drives me nuts walking around and seeing golf courses being sprinkled at 10 o'clock or noon and on a sunny day. And sprinkling is just needs to be done in the evening or at night. This isn't hard to do. It's not rocket science. So let's work together and get a reasonable plan that all of us can practice individually and as families. And let's work with our metro communities to make them become a greater part of this whole situation, because we're in it together. Win, lose, or draw. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rod. I would just say that Councilwoman Williams serves as our representative on the Regional Municipal Water Policy Board, and they do a lot of things on a regional basis. What we're talking about is City of Phoenix stepping up and providing real leadership on this issue. We hope and pray that other cities will follow our lead in going to the extent of leadership that we are. But if Phoenix waits, I think, and wait for others to act, I think we'll be waiting a long, long time. I think Phoenix needs to lead, and that's what this proposal from our Catherine Sorensen would do. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I had a couple questions for staff and maybe for the motion maker. But first, so maybe I'll start with Bill. So the motion that was just made, that would authorize a bill at the legislature going, it would not?
No.
Okay, all right.
No,
I still
this
have
was
questions about
just
that,
the
but-
resiliency fund. That's all that
Okay.
my motion
I just wanted to make
addressed.
sure, because I couldn't, obviously don't have it written down in front of me. Okay, so going forward, you and I had talked, going to the legislature, obviously a dicey proposition, bills fail, bills pass. That's a big component of what you want to do, or at least it's a component of what you want to do. Is that a fair statement?
Mayor, Vice Mayor Waring, there's dialogue ongoing right now about potential policy changes and potential legislative changes that would address some of these issues to shore up groundwater management in
Can I
this
ask
state.
dialogue with who?
Dialogue among stakeholders like the SRP or municipalities or the ADWR, other stakeholders in the water world. what we're not asking for your support on a particular piece of legislation. And as you, of all people, I think have been really clear about, you don't want to give staff a blank check to go out and support a bill. You don't want us to take
I mean, we don't have
this-
anything written down here.
Yeah,
you know, so
but
it's
you don't want us
hard
to take these.
support it.
What we're asking for is, these are the principles that we believe we ought to work for to create a more sustainable groundwater system for the future of our community. What we're asking for is your permission to pursue those principles as we have dialogue, and also to be a part of that dialogue that others are having. We might not be the lead on this. It may be ADWR or somebody else, but we want to make sure we have your backing generally on these various principles. But once there is a particular piece of legislation, our legislative team, and John Wayne Gonzalez is here, our legislative team will do what they always do, which is bring it back to you for a vote. What we're asking you for is some general direction. Do you think we ought to go forth and in dialogue with people pursue these kinds of ideas? Or because we don't want you to hear that we're out there talking to people about these ideas if you don't agree with them. And that's really what this dialogue is about. We think it's important. This is an important element of assuring our resiliency for the future, and our professional staff thinks that this is an important element of assuring the sustainability of groundwater for our residents. If you would prefer that we not go forward or pursue that dialogue, that is your choice, and we will follow your lead on that. But we felt it was important to expose you to our best thinking about what we could do. Not the specifics, because that's way down in the weeds, and it will come, if it is a particular policy or bill, that'll come back, and you'll have an opportunity to learn more about that.
Okay, so we'll have a chance to vote for or against the bill, or whether we support it as a council as a whole at a later date. As I was a little curious, it seemed a little bit, it sounded like you were determined to go forward, but I was like, I'm not really seeing the specifics that makes me comfortable to do that. Kind of like maybe a different form, but Councilwoman Geiger's comments about the CIP, it's hard to start unwinding these things if they get too far down the track. So you're down at the legislature talking to people, you're talking to the stakeholders and everything, with the idea that you'd have a bill ready to go in January? Is that... Or maybe not.
We're not really sure. We're not really sure, Vice Mayor. What I would say is this. It's almost like saying, is it okay for us generally to go down and say we don't like unfunded mandates, or we don't want you to take state shared revenue? What we're saying is we want to add another principle here as we go down to the legislature, and it may not even be on equal footing as those principles, but one of our principles is we want to pursue enhanced groundwater aquifer management through some of these ideas generally. And we would like your support to do that.
And generally, as you said, but it doesn't mean we're absolutely wedded. If there was a bill that didn't do some of these things, or there was a bill that did more of them.
Or it had something in it that the mayor and council didn't like, and you decided, even though it mostly goes down this road, but it's got this horrible element to it, we can't support the bill. You'll have that opportunity to do that through the legislative program.
Thank you.
Mayor? Thank you very much, Councilman Assis. I just want to make sure clear, the motion that Councilman Gates made was of the recommendations. It was to move forward with the first recommendation, the establishment of this Colorado River Resiliency Fund, which would not add to any increase in our water rate using existing capacity in our in the CIP. And then at my request, because I thought the recommendations, though related in terms of policy goals, were different enough that we would ask for a separate vote on the first part and the second part.
I appreciate
Some people may support the first part without supporting the second part, or vice versa. Councilman DeCiccio.
Thank you, Mayor. And I think where Councilman Waring was going as well. I mean, you're pretty clear about talking about incentives and disincentives without describing what they are. When you're talking about incentives, it could be a tax break to companies, could be to individuals, could be to anything. I like what Rick said earlier, and I would support a motion that literally said we want to enhance and look at all options related to groundwater management. I think that makes sense. It gives you enough room to go in there and negotiate. And what you're going to end up having too, ADWR is going to be doing the major lion's share of the negotiations here. And at the end of the day, we're going to come up with whatever the policy is that everybody else has agreed to. I just can't see the city of Phoenix moving on a path that is contrary to most of the other cities. Okay, so I don't think that's going to happen, Catherine. So if you'd be willing to revise the motion rather than be into incentives and disincentives, and people like me don't like the word disincentives too much, you know, we just don't think it works. You know, so if you'd be willing to make it more broad, I think you'll get more support up here. But if you're looking for something like that, that would end up possibly setting us apart from other entities, I would have some problems with that.
All right, thank you very much. And again, the motion on the table is not state legislative issues. We're going to get to that in just a moment. The motion that's on the table is the creation of the Colorado River Resiliency Fund. Councilman Gallego.
So in the first couple of years, how much of this fund would go to our partnership with Tucson?
I'm sorry, I neglected to bring the numbers with me, so I will bring them forward to you. Actually, in the first couple of years, it's a relatively modest amount, about $150,000 of it, and then that's for the partnership with Tucson. And then there's another couple million that go towards storing additional unused Colorado River water in local aquifers through the Salt River Project groundwater savings facility. And then the bulk of the money goes towards increasing our pumping and recharge capacity at our annual storage and recovery wells. But I'd be more than happy to bring that to you as a follow-up so that you can see those dollars.
I just would love to have more understanding about where the money's going for two reasons, one of which is I'm trying to decide if I should vote on this or not.
Yeah, absolutely, sure.
Well, the question is, I think what she's getting at is, in addition to the partnership with Tucson, what's your vision for the types of things that this fund would what are we voting on to likely fund? Not specifics to the specific project we brought back, but conceptually, what would this fund be spent on that otherwise wouldn't be in our current CIP program? What are we investing in if we vote yes on this?
Right. So, Mayor, Councilwoman Gallego, so the two things that you would be voting on that are new, that are not currently in our capital improvement program. One is the partnership with Tucson at approximately $150,000 a year. And I'm sorry, I want to get back to you with the exact number. But it is relatively modest over the next couple of years because if you recall, we're in kind of a pilot phase of that program. And then there's more significant money that goes towards the storage of our unused Colorado River water at the Salt River Project groundwater savings facility and at the Granite Reef Underground Storage Project. And I'm sorry, I don't want to put Cliff on the spot, but I don't know if he can remember those dollars off the top of his head. About $2 million.
Let me just also make clear, Mayor and Councilwoman Gallego, you were not voting on the CIP elements today. What you're saying is, come back. When you come back with a water CIP, we would like around $5 million a year, $5.5 million a year to be put into resiliency measures. And we're going to come back to you, and you're going to vote on a CIP that has projects that are specific. And so you'll get that opportunity to say, well, I don't like this project. Take it out. Or that's not what we meant when we said Colorado River resiliency. I think in general, they've told you where it's going to go for the near term, and it will be recharge here in the valley or injection in wells here in the valley and the Tucson partnership.
And we will have a little bit of a collaborative process with stakeholders and talk about how we prioritize, how we measure success.
Oh, Mayor, Councilwoman Gallego, absolutely. Yes.
Councilman Pastor?
Yes, I just need some clarity. Is this for information only? Because I keep hearing you're not going to be voting on this, and so I'm confused
I apologize.
across the board.
The motion was for the creation of a Colorado Resiliency Fund. So we will be voting on that in just a moment. Subsequent to that, assuming we get what we're not voting on immediately is any proposed state law changes. Assuming we get a motion subsequent to this on that issue, we will be voting on having staff move forward to begin conversations on the support enhanced aquifer management policies, which would be state policies. So we're not voting on any state legislative changes or even moving forward on that now. We're only voting on the creation of the Colorado River Resiliency Fund.
Mayor and Councilwoman Pastor, let me try, and I apologize for the confusion. So what you would be voting on today would be just the creation of the resiliency fund within the capital improvement program of the Water Services Department. And then we bring forward our entire capital improvement program later in the year. We do that every year for the council to review it and specifically vote on the elements within that capital improvement
But
program.
on the screen, there is 1 and 2. What the motion on the
Correct.
table is to support 1. Right now, there's no motion on
With-
number 2. We're just voting on number 1.
With the funding.
Correct, yes.
Mayor,
Councilwoman Williams, please.
following up on what she just said, I think the concern, what I'm hearing is, we're not sure which you're going to pick and choose to spend the 5.5 on. I think we're all in agreement we want the fund, but when you then throw it into the whole capital improvement program, that's a big pot of money. And I think we need to refine that when you bring that back, we want the details on how the $5 million is going to be spent and under the new concepts that you're coming up with this plan.
Mayor, Councilwoman
Please.
Williams, you absolutely will have that. And in fact, at that point in time, you'd have a choice to say, you know what? We might not like Project X, reduce the fund by $1 million, if that's what that project was, and put it toward pipe replacement or something different. So you always have that opportunity as a council to revise the program. But what we're trying to, we don't want to surprise you with this $5 million program in December or January when we come forward with it. We wanted to make sure you were on board with the general idea here of setting aside money for these kinds of projects.
Okay, other questions from members of this council? Vice Mayor?
Well, I was glad Councilman Gates brought up conservation earlier. It wasn't necessarily emphasized in this, but just so our viewers at home know, it's a true statement, correct, that per capita usage in Arizona, obviously we have a greater population than we had, say, 20, 25 years ago, but per capita usage, because of techniques that have done, because of policies that have been in place for a while now, is down fairly dramatically, correct?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, yeah, that's absolutely correct. About single-family residential gallons per capita per day usage is down about 27% over the last 20 years. It's a very significant decline.
So it is a dramatic change. I too, I agree with Councilman Gates. I think somebody else mentioned it as well. You know, the conservation component is already working. More focus that can be brought on that. Projects like this are, you know, potentially great. I have comments about what Councilman Gallego was asking, or Pastor, excuse me, was saying in a minute. But I just want viewers at home, I don't want them thinking there has been no progress in the last 20 years. They read articles in the paper. You and I have talked about this before. So just so people know at home, there's been quite a dramatic cut in per capita usage already. So conservation has been addressed, but it could always be addressed more. And we'd certainly like to see that. So if you have techniques about that, always feel free to bring them forward. To Councilwoman, Pastor's point, I also was a little confused. We kept talking about all the things this doesn't do that we're voting on right now, and that seemed a little odd because at a certain point we do have items that are information only, like the next one, and then we're voting on it, like the core, in a month. So is it necessary to have this vote today, given, you know, Councilwoman Williams' concerns about the money? I know we're going to get another chance to vote against it. It's just, why are we doing this today? I guess
Mayor,
is my direct
Councilman
question.
Waring, yeah, I think the issue here is so the difference between a policy session and a formal session. As you point out, in a formal session, we actually vote on very specific things. This is really setting a direction. So if the vote today is yes on item number 1, as the mayor's described, then staff would come back through the CIP process with very specific items in the CIP that would make up a Colorado River Resiliency Fund. If the vote today is no, then we wouldn't have that in our CIP and we would move on and not do that. But we really need the direction from the council. Should we put more work into this resiliency fund to bring forward, or no, or not? So what it does is it guides their work to come through the council process in December and January in the whole water CIP. Shall it have a resiliency section or not?
Mayor?
if that helps.
Councilman DeCiccio.
I think I can save this deal here, whatever it is you guys are working on. All you're doing is creating a fund, a $5.5 million. There is no other plan, nothing else in that fund. It's just about creating a resiliency plan that you're going to bring forward to us later without any direction or anything else. I mean, the first I heard, and I think that was one of the questions my staff had asked, is how much of it is really going toward the Tucson issue, and then how much of it is going to be for. That made me feel a lot better. But those are things that we all need to know. How much is going to be staying in the Phoenix metropolitan area, or even in Phoenix, because it's easier to get to your water here. And I get the fund, I get how that works when you do a bank. But that made a lot more sense too. So I think that if this is, and this is what I heard, no increase in water rates, just the creation of a fund, that's it. That's what I made my second. Is that correct to the motion maker?
Yeah, that is the intent of the motion.
And I think that's what I heard from Councilwoman Williams and others, that they're okay with creating the fund, but no direction on where it ought to go until you show us the specifics. All right, I'm fine.
All right, any other comments by members of the council? All right, roll call.
Councilman DeCiccio. Councilwoman Gallego.
Yes.
Councilman Gates.
Yes.
Councilman Noakowski.
Yes.
Councilwoman Pastor.
Yes.
Councilman Valenzuela.
Yes.
Councilwoman Williams.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Waring.
Yes.
Mayor Stanton.
Yes, so the motion passes, and so we're forming this resiliency fund, and we'll be back regularly to talk about more of the details. Catherine, Greta said it well. You're outstanding at your job, and your level of professionalism is very, very much appreciated, and I appreciate you bringing this idea forward before this council. All right, now, the second half of it has to do with possible giving staff direction to move forward with some possible policy changes that could be done at the state level relative to, well, I'll blow it if I explain it. Catherine, as much as you can in a relative nutshell, we're not talking about specific bills, but policy direction to bring up with stakeholders to possibly move forward with what?
With enhanced aquifer management that would better protect the water that we store underground and enhance sustainable management of the aquifer for the long term. That's what we're looking for.
Okay.
I thought I heard from the council a more general statement was preferable.
Okay, comments or questions on this direction to the staff to move forward? They don't want to, as we've debated since I've been mayor, a large amount of time is what can staff do to move forward legislatively without council approval? We're trying to do this the right way, that before they move forward with even beginning stakeholder meetings, that they get direction from our body. Councilman DeCiccio.
Sorry. Whatever she said on that, not here, I'll make that motion. How's that? That allow it to move forward, allows it for enough.
Okay, so Councilman DeCiccio made a motion on what she said. All right, do we have a second?
Second.
I wanted to make sure, because the way she said it couldn't have been any better than the
Exactly.
way I could have said it.
And obviously,
That's why she's the genius.
at the so we have a second, at the request of this body, not even wait till we have language, come back with updates on how that this is a big deal, and it's going to take probably more than one legislative session to get anything through, but it's a significant policy direction. So the motion was what Catherine had recommended. We have a second. Any comments or questions of this council? Councilman Gallego?
And so just to make sure we understand what the motion was. So this motion, if we go forward, we would be part of a robust dialogue about the Central Iowa Groundwater Replenishment District and making, is that still in the motion?
Yeah,
Okay.
so Mayor, Councilman Diego, the one thing about people in the water industry is that they love to meet and talk about these issues at excruciating detail. So really what will happen from here is we will move forward and have exactly those conversations with all those various stakeholders. As Councilmember DeCiccio mentioned, it is really complicated. And then we will bring those ideas back as they churn through the process. We will then bring those back.
Okay, and it will include, there'll be some link between where the building is occurring and where the water is coming, so that we can deal with some of the land subsidence issues and others.
Mayor, Councilman Gallego, yes, we will look at that as well. Yes.
Great, I just want to make sure, because I think that is an important part of this dialogue and to sustainable policy, so.
My impression is that at the various water meetings, people talk about the possibility about talking about this, and this would be the first action by someone saying, let's have a significant dialogue and see if we're going to move forward on something. We got to make a big policy decision on this as a state. City of Phoenix is a big player in this, but this is really a statewide decision about, have the conditions changed enough that we've got to change our state water policies. Any other comments by members of this council? Roll call.
DeCiccio. Gallego.
Yes.
Gapes.
Yes.
Noakowski.
Yes.
Pastor.
Yes.
Valenzuela.
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Waring.
No.
Mayor Stanton.
Yes, so that item passes 8-1, so we can begin the conversations, and Catherine, we look forward to seeing you many, many times, regularly in the near future, to give us updates on how it's going. We appreciate your leadership very much. All right, next item on the agenda is something that this body asked for as part of our budget vote. As part of the budget vote, we asked the city manager to do an assessment of our current operations and where we can pick up efficiencies. So what did he do? He told the new guy to be in charge of it, our assistant city manager. Welcome to Phoenix, Milton. This is not I think this is not an action item. We're just getting an update on how it generally is going, and then we'll even have a more significant update in terms of specific actions that you're recommending at our second core assessment review. With that as the opening, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. As building off your introduction, over the past 6 years, the city organization has shed over 3,000 jobs and identified almost $100 million in efficiencies, cost savings, and consolidations. The Comprehensive Organizational Review Examination, which is too many syllables, but it's a good acronym, CORE, is the next step in taking a step back to think about what we do, why we do it, and how we might do it differently. As you noted, the Assistant City Manager has accepted the challenge I gave him to lead this effort. I think he's the perfect person. Having managed cities of Louisville and Cincinnati, he has a good perspective without having preconceived notions from being in Phoenix. And so I think you're going to see the results of Milton's expertise and his fresh look at things. This is the first step in our process to identify issues and lay out a work plan together. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Dahoney.
Thank you, City Manager, Mayor, members of council. It is quite exciting to be able to finally come and talk about this in the open. We've been working on it all summer. With the exception, as Councilmember Gallego is well aware, we had several interruptions due to flooding, so we had to put it down and run and deal with flooding and then come back to it. I would be remiss if I did not begin by thanking the men and women that work for this organization that have given several hours of their time in order for us to get to this point. And I think you will see as you go through it, I try to have a little fun with it, so hopefully that'll be okay. By way of backdrop, the current conditions that we're looking at, declining resources, reduced workforce, and competing interests. We've heard that talked about in various meetings at both the policy level and also informal. We have within the competing interest arena several things that demand the time and attention of the professionals that work for our government. And in every instance at current, we demand a high level of service delivery. And so that is something that drives us day in and day out. That, however, prompts a change within the organization. City Manager Zuercher has talked repeatedly to the employees about the importance of working smarter. The backdrop means that we need to work differently. We can't continue to perform our work the way we always have, whether we want to or not. We have an overriding concern to save money. And then we need to be kind to our customers. Our customer service is of paramount importance. It doesn't matter whether we have all the financial resources or not. When we engage the public regarding our services, we need to be professional. We need to have follow through, and that has to be something that drives us as we show up every day. And so what is CORE? You heard the acronym that the city manager gave it. It is both a deep dive and a close examination, something that we needed to do in this organization. It was particularly interesting for me As I just came into the city of Phoenix, I assumed very little and I questioned a lot. So I didn't just take, because we've always done it, it is how we're supposed to go. We wanted to probe exactly what we were doing, how we were going about it, what the results were, and that was the process. And so in doing this, there are a lot of ways that you can approach it. There are a lot of different tools you can use. You could hire a consultant and pay them several $100,000. You could go out and get a survey and give it to every person that works here. And so rather than do any of those things, one, because we needed speed to get right to it, and also we did not feel that anyone outside of here knows the organization better than we do, we designed our own assessment tool, which is part of the attachment that you have in front of you. So that was 98 questions that departments were asked to complete in the front part of the summer. And then the ones that we really zeroed in on were the general fund departments, because that's where the bulk of our conversation always is. That's the bread and butter functionality of the government. We did, however, take a look at 2 enterprise funds, aviation and the Phoenix Convention Center. And if you're wondering why didn't we take a look at the rest of the organization, if we had chosen to do that, then we wouldn't be sitting here now. We'd still be going through it. We just didn't have time to do the organization in totality. We wanted wide input from the organization. We weren't looking for one-word answers. We weren't looking for cute catchphrases. We didn't want just the impressions of a single director. And so here's an example of a core meeting where a broad base of employees were engaged to give their input about it. Another picture of such sessions, a lot of departments worked in group meetings in order to bring the information forward, and that allowed us to have a rich discussion. So as you can imagine, my office filled up with a lot of data. There's papers and charts and reports and binders that departments submitted, and it can be overwhelming just to look at it. And so the first decision we had to make once we got all of the information, how are we going to deal with it? Little bites or a big swallow? And so we dove in, spent a lot of time, as the city manager can attest, with the door closed, going through it. And so we wanted to be very methodical in our advancement. First, looking at the operations of individual departments. What are you currently doing? How are you doing it? How are you structured? We looked at organizational charts that departments have. We looked at current vacancies that they have. We looked at how they're delivering services. We asked them to think about ideas for sustainability, in part because that's consistent with the current policy of this government. In addition to focusing on things that were relevant just to the department, we asked for things that were relevant for the entire organization. And then we asked departments to dream a little bit, and so that's where We Wish We Could comes in. Instead of being overwhelmed, as we sometimes are with our day-to-day running to put out fires, if we take a forward look within the city of Phoenix, what are things that we'd like to do? What are things that we think need to be done for long-term impact? And so we start with the departments. Around my neck is a penny. Ed gave a penny to each of the department heads, defining the single unit of change, meaning that the change in how we work has to begin with the department. And so we have examples here of things that have come from departments. The library is stopping the sale of bus passes effective November 1st because they need to get out of the cash handling business. That's causing them a lot of issues at individual branches. There are still scores of places for the public to get bus passes around the city, so it's not impacting their ability to utilize public transportation at all. And it serves as a first step to help the library deal with cash handling issues. Public Works is looking at a pilot to deal with some grade yard shifts that may save utility costs, and so they are testing that out as we speak. Public Works is looking at automating public garage payment system, so that if you go in a public garage, as you frequently do, you go to come out, you don't have to have a live person sitting there. There's a lot of technology that we could have to allow people to get out. The law department is looking at the use of electronic notification, which is safer for people associated with crime. And the street transportation department is working on integrating project engineering teams. So to sort of break that one down with streets, what we have today, 3 different divisions that
Excuse
have.
me, sorry, I think Councilwoman Pastor has a question.
Yes.
I have a question on the previous slide.
Okay.
Let's see. It is the law department pursuing electronic crime notifications. Can you explain that to me?
Yes, ma'am. Vice Mayor, Council Member Pastor, if you are, in some cases, a victim of crime, you're a domestic violence victim, and you're embroiled in a case that's going to court, the person that victimized you may still be living with you. If we send you a notice through U.S. mail, that victim may know that we have just engaged you. If we send electronic notification to your cell phone, it's safer. And so it's little things like that that would make our service delivery better, but that's what that's referring to.
Okay, because I think it's a good move, but I also would be very cautious, especially those that are in a level of income that they don't have access to technology, or limited to technology, and limited on possible phone services, that if they receive a text or if they receive something, that they're being charged. So that's just where my caution is on that piece.
Yes,
Thank you.
Part of the impetus for that has come from the public itself. It'd be better, instead of sending me something in the mail, give me a message. So,
Yeah.
but your point is well taken.
I just want to be able to protect those that don't have access to
Sure.
those items, to figure out a system that they would have access. My second question was the library to stop selling bus passes to get out of the cash handling. Is that possible that we could then set up vending machines?
Mayor, Councilman Pastor, when the library started selling bus passes, it was at a time when there were very, very few. In fact, only transit centers, libraries were selling them. Now we have arrangements, I think, with Circle K and Walgreens and dozens, Safeway, hundreds of retail outlets, so the library is not the only place where you can get them. The vending machine question we can address with Ms. Hyatt in the Public Transit Department and see how that might work in terms of the cost benefit of that.
Okay, thank you.
So to take the street transportation example, and to sort of play that out. So the current situation within streets, they have 3 different divisions where they have an engineering component. So that's requiring them to have a wider deployment, and it's thinning out their resources. What they're talking about is combining those into a single unit where there will be reducing bureaucracy. They want to be able to increase collaborative thinking. It reduces duplication and allows for faster deployment. So it, again, is allowing us to deliver services in a different way. It's allowing us to work a little bit differently and to work smarter. Departments are also talking about reallocating, and so that's a sort of inside baseball term that we use within staff. And so what you see on the screen are different colored individuals. What that's referring to are the various classifications that each department would have within it. And so when we talk about reallocating, what we're talking about is modifying the classification so that it better addresses what their operational needs are. So I'm giving a very simplified example of what the reallocation process is. At current, let's say you have 5 clerks and 2 secretaries. You take a close look at your operation and you realize you could actually do your job more efficiently if you had 2 clerks, a project manager, and an administrative assistant. So you go through the HR process of reallocation, and it enables you to get the right positions in the right part of your organization so that you can focus on your service delivery. Silo busting. So in talking with a number of people coming into the organization, there was this issue of silos that kept getting raised. And we don't mean to give an implication that departments do not work together, but clearly there's an opportunity for us to do that a little better.
Mayor?
Question, first off, Councilman Pastor had a question I should have got on the previous slide, then Councilman Gates. Councilman Pastor. Councilwoman.
On reallocating, it says there are 5 clerks and 2 secretaries. Then it goes to 2 clerks, a project manager, and administrative assistant. I'm assuming this, on the left side, that money is being reallocated to these positions, because now you added a project manager.
That's
which
correct.
is a higher salary.
That's correct.
Okay, so then we're not, it's just reallocating the money.
We're reallocating the positions, and in most instances when we do that, we are in effect saving money overall to the department and the government.
I would challenge that, and I'm only going to challenge it because if I become a project manager, you have 5 clerks and 2 secretaries that are at a lower level of in salary-wise. A project manager is at a higher salary. So for me, it's you may save a little bit, but it's not a lot. And so I'm asking, a project manager will get paid a higher rate, a different classification than 2 clerks and an administrative assistant. So
Mayor,
I guess for me, Milton, it would be nice to see an example of a budget of what 5 clerks are being paid and 2 secretaries, and then the other example to see where we're saving. Just visual for me.
Mayor,
Thank you.
Councilmember Pastor, we can certainly provide that to you. This is not a real scenario. These are simply, it's just made up to illustrate what the reallocation process is. But the numbers-wise, you're correct. And so when we do reallocation, in most cases, you're talking about actually saving money. The other thing that you're doing is allowing the department to be more efficient in how they go about their business. So we will provide an example with dollars to further illustrate what the reallocation actually looks like. And so relative to...
Question, Councilman Gates had a question?
Just quick one, Mayor. I was just wondering if Ed Zerker had taken this picture in Kansas.
Yeah, which department owned that building? Milton.
This
Yes.
meeting isn't dragging on long enough, Milton. We need these guys to...
Sorry about that.
All right.
You know.
The request from Councilman Valenzuela is no bad attempts at humor. Milton.
Thank you, Mayor. So the point we're really trying to get at here is we want departments to think differently or to behave differently. In order to do that, we need them to think differently. So it's not simply enough to think about solving an issue within the 4 walls of your department. The best solution may lie outside the 4 walls of your department. And so the question that we pose within the assessment tool is there a collaboration with another department that you wanted to do? And here is an example of some of the responses that we received. Housing and Neighborhood Services would want to do a collaboration about common goals. One of the things that came out of CORE, a realization that we have multiple call centers within various departments. And so a legitimate question is, do we really need to have 3 different call centers? Or could one call center effectively staffed provide the same level of service? To analyze having the planning and development department review and approve right-of-way permits. They're already approving other kinds of permits. It wouldn't be that much more effort to train them on dealing with right-of-way so that, again, we could stretch out our service delivery. Library wanting to partner with ED, and then the SAP, which is a system that we have that deals with our financial system, is not currently being used to the maximum level available. So the finance department would like to work with individual departments to get them to utilize it more. And so those are examples of working across the organization versus just within your department. And we got a whole list of other suggestions and ideas on how silo busting could take place. Roadblocks, curveballs, and other impediments. So sometimes within the organization, the roadblock is me. And we got to get out of our own way if an opportunity is there. But sometimes there are other things that are impeding our ability to deliver top-level service and to address things that are in front of us. 2 of those are the certain processes that we have and certain ordinances that are on the books. So we'll start with processes that we have. We got a long list of things where departments pointed out that the current process that we're using is in fact impeding their efficiency. And so when you think about it, I know we have 2 members on the phone and you're not seeing what I'm doing, but I'm holding up a cell phone. So this cell phone, as we know it, actually came into being during the 70s. And you think about all
Milton, hold that up again. I'm taking a picture. I'm going to text it to the 2 council members on the phone.
Here we
It
go,
must
Milton. Once
really
again.
be late in here. Okay, thank you, Mayor. Where was I? Okay. So I was holding up the cell phone, and the point I'm trying to make, cell phones being, as we know them, effective in the 70s. And you think about all the changes that have taken place since the creation of the modern day cell phone. And what we have within our organization is many work processes that predate the cell phone by decades. We have ordinances that are on the books that have been there for decades. And so we want to take a fresh look, first starting with work processes. These are examples of things that the workforce says we need to address. We have hundreds of people that work here part-time, and we're still doing manual payroll for them. There has to be a better way, and so we want to look at that. While we are not in the wholesale hiring business and won't be in the foreseeable future, there is still the idea that when we do hire, the process is too cumbersome. So we want to be able to see, can we shorten that? Is there a way to make it more efficient? There are a number of ordinances, more than I've listed on this slide, that are at issue. And so what we would propose to do is look at ordinances, and where language needs to be amended, we want to be able to make a business case to the council and bring specific language relevant to a specific ordinance to the appropriate subcommittee and talk to you about it. Here's what the ordinance currently says. Here's what we think conditions warrant it needing to say. Let's have a conversation about that. And then with your support within the subcommittee, assuming that we could get it, bring it to formal so that everything's being done in a very transparent and above board way. We also ask departments to think green. What are some green initiatives that this government could do? Save money, enhance sustainability. Here are examples of what we got. Converting to using an electronic system for court orders, putting motion sensor lights in bathrooms and kitchens and supply rooms, because what tends to happen, people go in there, they turn the light on, they leave, they don't turn it off, so it's burning all night. Being a little smarter, green-wise, would allow us to save money and be more efficient. Here are additional examples of thinking green. Recycled asphalt is something that's available to us. Installing more smart irrigation. We were just talking about water. We need more smart irrigation systems in our parks. So this long list of work processes that could be improved upon, and a long list of ordinances that could be revisited, we would propose to create an implementation team that would actually do the sort of trolling of the weeds, if you will, to figure out what could be changed and what could be brought forward, and we would dedicate an effort to doing that. Stop them if you can. So one of the things we observed within the core process is over the last several years, even though we've been losing people, having fewer financial resources and other resources, we've still been adding a number of new initiatives. So in addition to the core mission that departments have, there are new things that they also have been charged with doing. And so we simply posed the question to them, if there were things that you could stop doing, if you had the authority to do it, so that you could concentrate more on what your core mission is, what would some of those things be? And so what's on the screen is a list of items, and there are others. The department said, well, we wouldn't do this because we would put more attention into what our department is actually supposed to be doing. So we know we have to keep doing it until something changes, but we at least wanted to point that out. And so the notion of crossing boundaries is where we start to talk about issues that cut across multiplicity of departments. So the way our process worked, they took the 98 questions, and I sat down individually with each department and the deputy director or deputy city manager that they report to, and I went through their submittal. So the department only knew the items they were talking about. They didn't know the items that other departments were bringing up. So I had the ability to sit there and listen to everybody, and these are some themes that were coming out in multiple meetings. So we start first with collections. We have a number of organizations that have fee-for-service. So we provide a service, we collect fees from the public. What we found is that departments do it differently. Some departments do collections internally, some have a third party that does it for them. We have varying degrees of success rates on collections. And so what we're doing there, the finance department is providing the leadership to work with all the departments that deal with collections to see if we can better coordinate how we're going about it, and we think we'll be able to improve the amount of money that we collect. We have a massive project team that's working on e-procurement. We were celebrating in our previous meeting the passage of a new purchasing code. We're also working on improving the way that we procure goods and services. This government spends $700 million every year on goods and services. So if we can improve the way we do it, if we can look at the steps that it takes to procure, if we can do more things electronically and push less paper, then we can save money. And that has a positive impact on the budget. The shared services piece relates to actually our use of technology. So what we're asking is for departments to first make a business case on all the technology investments that we make. Don't just go buy the latest software because it's there. What's the business case that you're trying to solve? Make sure that we're coordinating our investments of both hardware and software through the ITS department. And let's make sure that we understand who's going to service what we're purchasing. Because a company will make a product and 3 years later they'll tell you, well, we don't service that anymore. So then what happens? So given the vast amount of money that we spend, we want to be able to do a better job with that. The P card is something that we think whose time has come. We are a 24/7 organization, not 9 to 5. So there are times when the fire department will be in an emergency situation after hours or over the weekend, and there is something that they need. There's no fiscal person available. So if they had a P card for small purchases, they would be able to do it. We don't want to ask people to go in their own pocket to go and get what's needed. We have field people that work in an emergency repair situation. They may need a part. And so there's no time to go do a procurement for a new contract when you could just go to Home Depot and get the part. And so this would enable us to do that. The reestablishment of the Space Committee, I'm told that we used to have one some years ago. Here is our current situation. We've got some departments that have excess space. We've got other departments that are tight as a drum. And in addition to that, we have leases that we're paying millions of dollars to lease space. So if we had a space committee, we could be more efficient in moving people into the right locations. We may be able to then access some real estate. We may be able to be more efficient. So this is an opportunity to work on that. And so our state of aspiration is simply the forward look. These are the wish we could items. Establishing Friends of Public Art. Paperless would be a tall order in a government with the requirements that we have, but it's still a goal. Consolidating our email. Right now we have multiple email systems, and it ties back to shared services where certain functionality should be centralized. Telephone systems, email, certain databases are all examples of that. Parks feels that we should be more efficient in our provision of pools. Fire department would like automated payroll for electronic patient care, all things to work towards. These are examples just to give you a flavor of the things departments mention, but there are others. And then we engage them about the difference we're making. So if Department A, let's say their budget is $50 million, at the end of that year, we need to be able to say more than we just spent $50 million. What needle did we move? What changed as a result of a $50 million investment of the public's money? And so we need to be able to develop outward-looking metrics so that we have something to hold ourselves accountable to. And so over the next few years, we will develop stronger metrics. The city manager wants to see us do that. It's not going to happen overnight, but it's clearly something to work towards. Let there be less. Now we're getting down to other things that reduce the expense side of the budget. So individual departments talked about position elimination. I've made an attempt to talk about the reallocation. In some instances, there's some restructuring that could take place, and then redeployment. So today's conversation with you is more about qualitative. Next month's conversation with you is about quantitative. So how much can we reduce the budget as a result of taking some actions around eliminating positions, et cetera, et cetera. And so to sort of summarize how this all shakes out, there's things to do on the administrative side, things for staff. Where we have found a process that needs to be overhauled, let's get to it. Let's form an implementation team and work on what we can work on. For the city council, we know we need to develop a business case for you on each ordinance that we think needs to be amended. And our pledge is still to bring that back through the normal course of business in the light of day, where we can make the business case and see if you support it. And then the second item relative to the city council is next month, as part 2 of CORE, we will be specific with you in terms of here are the number of positions we are proposing to eliminate. Here are what those positions are. These are the departments that would be affected, and we will give you a bottom line total as to what the financial impact of that be. And at that time, we will ask for your vote and support, and will then change the budget accordingly. So with that, stay tuned for part 2, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you very much, Milton, for the very, very thorough presentation of CORE, and we'll be looking forward to CORE, the sequel, next month. Councilman DeCiccio, I have one comment from the public. This is not an action item, because I do know a couple council members who have to sneak out of here, which may happen. We'll not be voting on this, but if you want to get a comment to Milton, now's the time. Councilman DeCiccio.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple things. The CORE assessment tool that you put out, this is going to be the foundation for CORE 1 and CORE 2. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Well, I got to tell you, and I'm going to be very, very nice about this, but as much as I can be, because we are facing probably a critical financial crisis that this city has had in the last 2 years, dealing with a structural deficit. This does not even look at that. Let me read to the public what this is not, because this will tell you a lot more than what it is. By itself, CORE cannot fix the budget challenges the city will continue to face. That's our number one problem. That's not being addressed by what we thought was going to be addressed. It cannot solve the challenges posed by the increasing pension costs. That is another huge issue dealing between 18, depending on what numbers you use, between 18 and maybe close to $40 million a year. CORE is also not a strategic plan. CORE does not ask for changes in taxes or fees, and it does not address issues of unsustainable service levels. That is our CORE. Our core issue at the city of Phoenix is dealing with how do we fix this structural deficit. I like the idea that you're working on putting some of these together, but getting rid of cable is not a core function of the city of Phoenix. Got it. But at the end of the day, there are other functions. If you're not looking at a strategic plan, if you're not putting in place a true plan where this city needs to lead us, this literally, I mean, if you look at the, and I don't even know where to start on this. I had a conversation with Councilman Gates. Before you spend one more tax dollar, before you spend one more minute of anybody's effort and time, you need to go through his subcommittee and get better direction. This is just unacceptable. We are a $3.5 billion operation at the city of Phoenix, $3.5 billion. And the type of questions we're asking people are things that we can literally get from the budget director. What is your average span of control? What are your positions? How many employees work remotely? Those are basic questions. They're good questions to ask, but they're basic time management questions. They are not strategic questions of where we need to be as a city. So from my end, and I have to leave early, but I really expected a lot more, and I'm incredibly disappointed at this point. And I think we can readjust this. If you're looking to do nothing, this is a great model to do that. If you're looking to do, I'm sorry, I don't mean it that way. If we're looking to do and nibble on the edges, this is the great model. But it doesn't set in place a true plan where the city needs to go for a city this large that's facing the major crisis that we've had in the last 2 years. And it's okay to put everything on the table, whether it's a tax increase or cuts, whatever they could be. Put everything on the table, but get better direction from Bill Gates' committee or somebody up here. I mean, from my end, I want to see something more strategic than this. Is it something that we're going to end up voting for? Sure, you move things along that'll save some monies, save some things, but at the end of the day, it doesn't put us on a path.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councilman DeCiccio. And so just for viewers at home, this was this was voted on by the council as part of the budget hearing to go through the core assessment review process. Today's information and discussion, the core assessment review will come back with specific recommendations, and obviously have a thorough discussion and debate about
But
whether
Mayor,
we take
it
those
was about a
actions.
strategic plan. It was so clear at that meeting. Everybody here walk through the debate, pull out the verbatim.
Mayor,
I
Council
don't know anyone who
DeCiccio,
didn't
I think
use
it's
the word
important for us to
strategic.
note, this is never intended to be a strategic plan.
Why?
This was intended to be, that was not the direction we were given. If the council wants to do a strategic plan, then we can take that direction. What this was intended to do was to go, and this grew out of the issue about vacancies, really is where this came from. And so what we said we wanted to do was to take a very deep dive, as Milton explained, into each part of the organization to find out what we have in terms of our operations and do some assessment of that. That's a much lower level, granular level review than a strategic plan would be. That was not our intent, nor our communication that we were going to do a strategic plan in that way. And so I disagree with the idea that this is nothing. This is a significant piece of work that Milton, the department, and the employees have done to really assess what we're doing now with 3,000, excuse me, fewer employees and the work that we have to do. So what you're asking for is another level than what this is.
I remember clearly Bill Gates talking about strategic plan. I remember myself. I remember Thelda Williams talking about it. And if you described it the way you just did, that would seem to be pretty strategic to me. I'd never heard of the word a core until recently, until we saw this presentation, not the presentation, but saw the report on this thing. So I'm not sure.
Councilman, please.
But at the end of the day, I think you need to go to Councilman Gates' subcommittee and get better direction.
I think we asked for a quote-unquote organizational review. I think CORE is the professional city staff's attempt to do an organizational review. What I think what Councilman DeCiccio is talking about is, a discussion about tax policy and raising taxes, et cetera, which we can have that discussion another day. For today's purposes, this is our professional city staff's an attempt to let us know what they've been working on relative to an organizational review. And I think he's going to have some very specific recommendations that we're going to have to vote on next month in terms of position elimination, some of the reorganizations, et cetera. This is significant work that has been presented here today, and I know it's going to be even more significant next month.
Mayor, just really quick, and I'll end with this though too, so others can have it. A strategic looks at what is and what isn't a strategic function of your operation. You can't talk about mission creep unless you know what your strategic functions are. And you don't know where you're going to be looking to readjust or re-examine unless you know what your most important priorities are. You don't know that until you figure that out.
So I think each and every council member, next month, I think what you heard is that there's going to be some very specific requests on position eliminations and some things that we should eliminate doing. Councilman, if you want to make specific recommendations next month about additional things that you think should be eliminated next month, we'll have a good thorough debate about that and there will be an opportunity to do so. But I think what we're going to hear next month is, as part of an organizational review, specific steps that our professional staff is making about what positions should be eliminated and what functions should be reorganized within the departments. And oh, by the way, I think this is going to be part of an ongoing effort. And I actually do think it's a good thing that this be reported to the efficiency subcommittee if there's opportunity to have that in advance of the next meeting. I think that would be a very good thing.
And Mayor, in my defense on this, you cannot know what it is your recommendations are until you lay them out. So you have to rely on staff to be able to do that. To think that any council member up here can actually come up with ideas like that, they can't unless there is a true plan put in place so that we can evaluate each item individually. You can't come up with that. You can't even come up with ideas unless you know what they are and what the true costs are and whether or not there could be a better way of providing that service at all.
Excellent.
Right,
Other
thanks,
comments
Mayor.
from members of the council? Anybody on the phone have a comment for what we've heard here today about where we're going, if you will, with the core assessment review, the organizational review?
No, I think I'm good, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Vice Mayor. Any other comments? Councilman Valenzuela?
Yeah, I want to thank city staff, beginning with you, Milton, our assistant city manager, and our city manager, Ed Zerker, and all of our department heads. And let's not forget that the city of Phoenix, just a few years ago, was facing a $277 million deficit. And just a few years later, we were able to actually come into an area where we had a surplus. And I want to thank every city employee for helping the city get there, because every city employee took a concession. Just like everyone had to do again, I think we all did. For those of us on this side of the dais, we've all voluntarily did that. But we knew that dealing with the deficit that we're dealing with now, in some ways, it's going to be harder than what we dealt with a few years ago with even a larger deficit. After already making those adjustments and making those cuts, where else can we possibly cut? And we need something like CORE. Now, page 2, prompting change. Work smarter, work differently, save money, adjust business model to enhance efficiency, and of course, be kind to customers, which is not an option. Things are in this document, like reallocating positions, silo busting. It's all about efficiency, and that's what I knew that's what I expected out of this report, and I believe that we are on the right track. I disagree with my colleague who says, this is. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but for the most part, I thought I heard something like this is not enough, or it's nothing, or certainly whatever it was, it sounded like it was minimizing the effort of our assistant city manager and all of the city employees that are working more efficiently while working harder, so that we can continue to save money, so that we are not going to come into another deficit. So I do believe that we're on the right track. I appreciate all of the hard work that's been put into this, and I look forward to more reports.
All right, this is information on an action item, but I want to give the final word to Milton before, Councilman Pastor, do you have a question?
Yes,
Please.
I do.
I apologize.
It says final recommendation on cost-cutting measures to be presented in November. We only have 2 formal meetings. That's November 5th or November 19th. My question is that it talks about coming back and giving ideas about ordinances and items like that. We have subcommittees, and I'm assuming, and I want to be on the record, that all of this conversation is going to go through our subcommittees before we vote on something in November. So I'm unclear what we'll be voting on in November.
Mayor, Councilman Pastor, thank you. I'll let Milton describe the implementation team process. But November, there is a policy session in November, and I forget the day, it might be November 19th, if I'm correct. The idea would be to come back with those specific cost reduction items for that meeting, but the ordinances are on a different track. Milton?
Yes, that's exactly correct, Mayor, Councilmember Pastor. The ordinances will require a lot of work to develop language, and so it will take time with each of those, and they each would be brought to the appropriate subcommittee when it's baked. The next month piece is more getting at specificity with how many positions are we talking about? What's the dollar value of those? Where are they located within the organizational structure? So one of the things that we've heard previously is we need to eliminate more than 5 or 10 positions. We agree with that. It's a very difficult process, and we need to bring you a comprehensive list of what we're talking about. The other thing that, in terms of prior direction that we were given and that we followed, we never intended CORE to be a piece that would ask for tax increases or raise fees. It wasn't meant to do that. So it's been obvious to all of you and all of us that we need to work differently. And the only way to do that is to drill down into departments and get at how are they currently performing, and to examine how they could perform better, how we could be more efficient. So all of your comments are well taken, and we take them with the motivation that is provided, that you want to see us do a better job. We agree with that. And we will come back, and we want to be transparent about it, and more efficiency with space and with contracts and with all the things that make up our organization is what we will spend time on.
Councilwoman.
So okay, so we will be transparent throughout this whole process. So that means also including when there's ordinances being changed, that's including those that are going to be affected by it.
Yes.
In the sense of historic preservations, I'm not sure where we're going to go there, but those neighborhoods will be notified as to the process and have an input.
Yes.
Same with consolidating 29 regular pools into 15 large pools. I mean, I'm assuming there will be a dialogue with the community to determine what 15 pools will remain open.
And just understand, that is dreaming, big dreams into the future.
Well,
And so it would absolutely have to be everything you described and more if we
Okay.
even get to that point. The other thing I would just just say, what we're talking about for November 18th is the policy session, is we're really focusing on vacancies, as we had a significant dialogue about that back in the spring. And so one measure of CORE was really to dive into the vacancies that exist in the organization and figure out where those vacancies are that we can do without, where they need to be reallocated. And so now that's part of this work that we're coming back with that grew out of our budget discussion in the spring.
Okay.
Mayor?
Councilman?
Yes.
Jump in.
Thank you. This is Bill Gates. Couple things. First of all, I've been honored to chair the efficiency subcommittee for several years. And, throughout that process, we've had a lot of difficult meetings, and we've had to dig through a lot of the details. And we've had a lot of meetings where we've gone through position elimination. And that's a difficult thing, but it's something that needs to be done. And so, Mayor, I appreciated your perhaps that we could have a discussion of that in the subcommittee, because I think we found in the past, in working with our former city manager, that we were able to address some of those issues and find a good sort of landing place before we went to the full council. So I think that might make some sense. And finally, too, I think the discussion of strategic certainly has been, there's been interest by some of us on the council for that issue and that discussion, but clearly CORE is not that. But I think it's something that some have an interest in, and I'm sure there'll be further discussions in that direction. But again, if this can be sent to subcommittee, I think there could be some positive that would come out of that.
Okay, thank you very much.
I have one more question.
Councilman Pastor, please.
So on November 18th, we will be discussing eliminations of positions or elimination of vacancy positions.
I think almost exclusively it's vacancies,
So, okay,
not filled positions.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, I don't think we're talking about layoffs in any regard. We had at the last budget, obviously, position elimination was a massive discussion about, number one, what the cost savings would be. Should we just as a blanket policy eliminate all vacant positions that were there, or should we do it in a more strategic way? This council voted to do it in a much more strategic way than just kind of slashing every position, because some of those positions, though happen to be unfilled positions, were still core positions for this city. And so we allowed the city manager to make recommendations about what positions could be eliminated without affecting services and which one would affect services. Obviously, in the meantime, there have become more vacant positions within the city. And so this will be a process that we're going to be going through regularly, probably over the next few years, every so often as positions become available, which ones should then be eliminated and reorganized, as was suggested by Milton, or which ones should be kept and refilled in its current configurations. This is kind of an ongoing effort. All right, any final comments on core assessment? So I guess the request is that we go before Councilman Gates' subcommittee in advance of the November meeting And then this council can accept or reject any of the particular recommendations. I'm sure over time that as this process makes some tough recommendations, this council will accept many of them and probably reject some of them, and that's exactly how the process is designed to do. And that's exactly the tension that should exist, if you will, between the professional staff and the elected officials as we represent the people of Phoenix. Without further ado, this meeting is. Oh, I'm sorry, Greta Rogers. You did want to make comment on this item before we adjourn the meeting. I apologize.
What is going to be a long and difficult and complicated process. This city has treaded water, thank you, treaded water for over 20 years. Just the same way, we just do it the same way, everybody's happy and comfortable. This is change time. And I have the highest regard for what these gentlemen have begun. This isn't going to happen all between now and November or January. This is going to go on for years. And thank God we're making a stab at beginning. Let's have patience and reasonable understanding of the complication of this. This is like deciding you're going to build a huge building. You don't do it between today and 12 months from today. And that's what we are doing. We are changing the way the city of Phoenix listens and executes governing this city, which is for the citizens of the city of Phoenix who are the city. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rogers. Between your very kind comments about Ms. Sorensen earlier and your kind comments about Milton now, are you feeling okay? All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you.